The first and original Five Nights at Freddy's game is arguably the most memorable and perfect FNAF game that there is. A FNAF game that was the starting point to the rest of the series that has been expanding for the last 11 years now. But what if we were to try and fix Five Nights at Freddy's 1 by changing the pizzeria where we make it more realistic, and by revisiting the animatronics by using redesigned characters that brings new life and horror to FNAF 1? Well, my name is Bronze Films, and as you read by the title, here's how I fixed or redesigned the FNAF 1 Pizzeria and Animatronics. Before we get started, for a quick disclaimer, I don't actually think anything needs to be fixed with FNAF 1 or even the animatronics. Yes, I know I just said it, but that's honestly for the sake of the title, and FNAF 1 is perfect as it is. Instead, this is just my interpretation and how I think aspects of FNAF 1 could have looked like if we had the entire lore and story to look back on. This video is also heavily inspired by FN Plus or FNAF Merch Plus, who made this amazing video titled Fazbear Fright Sucks as a horror attraction, so I fixed it. Please everyone go check out his video where he makes some great fixes to the FNAF 3 Pizzeria. So all credit for this idea goes to him and his channel. So let's first go over everything wrong with the FNAF 1 location and what even needs to be fixed. As a whole, the pizzeria works great, and especially when it comes to the gameplay and the environment it creates. But it definitely feels like some rooms are missing, and at times some rooms feel a bit flat. So at its core, I really set out to make my own pizzeria feel realistic and closer to what I think the pizzeria would look like if it were made today. I took a mix of inspiration from other pizzerias in the franchise, the FNAF 1 movie location, which is the most realistic example we have, inspiration from real life restaurants and places I've been to, and even from a Chuck E. Cheese that I used to visit as a kid. So let's go over the original pizzeria, starting with the dining area. This is a wide and dark area where you usually find Bonnie and Chica. It's at the center of the location that the pizzeria almost builds off of. There's not much to fix besides one flaw we'll get back to soon. We also have the main stage and Foxy's Pirate Cove, which are both great and do the job, but I think where they're located in the pizzeria can always be improved on. From here we have two connecting hallways that lead us to the office, hallways that create the perfect ambiance when an animatronic is at the end of it staring at the camera, hallways that I feel like are a part of almost every single FNAF game and will be a part of my pizzeria. There are also the supply closets attached to these hallways that add to the horror experience in such a natural way where you can even find Easter eggs here, so of course I also have to include them in my pizzeria. From here we have the infamous FNAF 1 office we all know and love. This is honestly the thing I don't want to change at all. The two doors, the desks with monitors in front of you, and pull-up cam system work perfectly. The only thing there is to change is incorporating lore from other games and treating FNAF 1 as if it was released alongside the other games or lore. But with the rest of the pizzeria, this is where I think some changes can be made to really make it feel like this is an open and active restaurant while having its own secrets. For example, we have the backstage, which is fine, but for one, it's not even behind the stage like you imagine it would be, and there's only one endoskeleton and a few animatronic heads. Would this really be enough if something happened to one of the animatronics? Shouldn't there just be more? Or with the restrooms, we don't really see them besides the outside where you can find Chica at times, making it feel like parts of the pizzeria are hidden for some reason, and this also applies to the kitchen. Now I get the point of this camera is so players can rely on audio instead of visuals, but I think this could have been incorporated somewhere else while allowing us to see the kitchen and even have a mechanic here. So maybe by now you agree that there should be some changes, so let's take the FNAF 1 or map layout and start to make our changes. The first thing we're gonna do, and actually the only thing that will stay the same, is keeping the dining area and where the main stage is placed. Everything else will be moved, and of course we'll add new parts to the building. We will, however, make the dining area a bit larger, and will also make the stage larger to accommodate for the bigger audience. So first things first, let's add a prize counter to the left of the stage and in the very corner of the dining area. I'm honestly surprised the original FNAF 1 location never had a prize counter. We did see one in games like FNAF 2 or Ultimate Custom Night, and eventually a prize counter was added to the FNAF 1 map featured as the game hub for Help Wanted. The prize counter is in the gap in between the two hallways, and it seems like this is definitely something Scott would have gone back and changed. We also have a doored off supply closet near the bottom corner that would usually be on one of the hallways. From here, and really the first major change I've made, is adding an arcade area to the right of the diner that is the same height as the dining area but overall smaller. This took inspiration from FNAF 3, Pizzeria Simulator, and even all of the modern locations that have some sort of arcade area. Especially if you believe that the FNAF 1 and 3 locations are the exact same, it makes a lot of sense to have one. But on top of that, I would also add Foxy's Pirate Cove to the upper left corner of the arcade, making him the animatronic overseeing this area. I've always thought that Foxy Foxy should have a much larger role and in a sense should almost be separate from the other animatronics. So this would actually be known as Foxy's Arcade Cove, where kids would play arcade machines and visit Foxy. Moving to another change, and one that I feel like we all knew was missing, is the entrance located at the bottom of the dining area. This adds to the realism of the pizzeria, and basically every location after this one had an entrance. It may seem like a small thing, but I feel like it's the start to making this feel all more whole and more together. So connected to the entrance will be something else I see as realistic, an employee break room. Break rooms aren't really something we saw until the modern games, but it still fits perfectly with the FNAF 1 location, and we have a whole mechanic to it we'll get back to later. There are connecting employee doors to the entrance and to the diner, so next to the break room but not connected we have the safe room. Now this won't technically be on the camera system, as you wouldn't be able to see what's inside this room besides any specific way we'll go over towards the end of the video, but I think we all know why it's important to have a safe room in this pizzeria and what it eventually leads to. And just knowing that this room was right next to an arcade and employee break room that were constantly filled with people makes the situation that much more interesting. Continuing to move to the left, we have a change that I took straight from the FNAF 1 movie location, the loading dock. The loading dock isn't necessarily needed for the pizzeria, but obviously they'll need boxes of supplies. So this is where they'd get everything they need in order to run the pizzeria, and I also think it just adds to the horror environment and the idea that something could be hiding back there. Moving up, we actually have the hallway that connects to the right side of the office that is now moved up all the way here, now connecting the loading dock to the kitchen, and it'll simply be known as hallway number 2. Now with the kitchen being in the upper corner, this is straight from the Chuck E. Cheese I used to visit, and really I feel like we see this with any attraction. The kitchen is usually the furthest away from the entrance and here behind the dining area to make it easy to bring food in and out. Then connected to the kitchen we have the backstage, this time actually behind the main stage. The backstage stretches across the diner, acting as a long hallway of backup animatronic parts for supplies. So when we cover this room in detail, there's going to be a lot more than just a few animatronic heads. Connected to backstage, we conveniently have parts in service, the place where animatronics are taken to be fixed or repaired, and the place where we might see some familiar faces. This is a pretty large area compared to most of the pizzeria, since many animatronics would have to be repaired at a time, and it's also holding parts from older locations. Parts in service wasn't in FNAF originally, but it makes a lot of sense to have it now, and it'll actually be replacing the right hallway and will be the room right next to our office. Instead of being at the bottom and in front of the dining area, now we'll move it to the left of the diner while keeping the same size of the office. To me it made more sense that it's further away from the dining area and that there is only one hallway to access it if you weren't an employee. So from here we're gonna add the left hallway, or hallway number 1, that has always been here, alongside our second supply closet that is usually there in the FNAF 1 map. But next to this hallway and left to the dining area we have the restrooms and the entrance to them. This is basically an exact copy to how the restrooms looked in FNAF 1, but the entrance is slightly longer and the restrooms themselves are also much longer, matching the hallway. Because this pizzeria is already as big as it is, it just made sense to make both restrooms much larger. But finally, to end off the pizzeria, we have a vent in the corner of the dining area leading all the way to parts in service. Almost every other FNAF location has a vent, and here I thought only one was necessary, and like many parts of the pizzeria, this will have its own mechanic that we'll get back to in the gameplay portion. So this is my FNAF 1 map, but before we can go over the 3D pizzeria and renders I made, we first need to go over the lineup of animatronics, or what just exactly I changed and why. First, we of course have the classic FNAF 1 Freddy, and right off the bat I have to give massive credits to Nova Bandit for these amazing models that will be linked in the description. You have this great normal design with this hat, bow tie, and mic, but the major difference you might have already noticed is that these animatronics have a really cool fur that makes them feel that much more realistic. It's a small detail that honestly enhances these animatronics in my opinion. I don't really even think a change needed to be made to any of the FNAF 1 designs, but if I were to change something, adding realistic fur would be exactly that. Next we have Bonnie, also having the realistic fur design, and every animatronic on this list will have this feature. Here you also have the classic FNAF 1 Bonnie design we all know and remember, where he's fitted with his guitar and actually has a blue tint, which I love as I honestly always thought that he was blue. Another great design choice by Nova Bandit that I also knew I had to include are the 2 buttons on the side of his jaw. These are actually from FNAF Help Wanted and from Bonnie's repair level, where you have to press these 2 buttons to lift off his mask. So in the real world, or knowing that these animatronics are faked regularly, it makes sense to have these buttons visible. Next we have Chica and her cupcake, and like Bonnie we have the 2 buttons on the side of her head, and this is also from Help Wanted and from Chica's repair level in the kitchen. It just adds more realism to this animatronic, and the cupcake also has a more glossy design. The cupcake also has sharp metal teeth just like in the FNAF 1 movie, which could mean the cupcake can be a threat in certain situations. I'd say Chica's design has always been menacing, so I'm excited to showcase her design in the actual pizzeria and in environments where we actually haven't seen her yet at all. Moving on to the biggest change in the animatronics, we have Foxy, who will now be known as Captain Foxy. This is another amazing design feature by Nova Bandit that allows you to have Foxy wear a pirate coat and hat. I wanted a design choice to fit with him overseeing the arcade area and being in a separate area from the other animatronics. I actually love this design and I wish it got more recognition, as maybe some of you recognize this Foxy from the Cursed Dreadbird DLC and from Help Wanted 2. It keeps the core of the character while adding a new element to it that also meshes well with the rest of the pizzeria. So now looking at the last animatronic that is from FNAF 1, we have Golden Freddy. I think what really elevates this design are the almost burnt or faded parts of the fur and animatronic. We especially see it with the pitch black eyes, and it really does remind me of these designs like on Pip, Bonnie, or Jackie. A lot of the times this is known as agony tears, and it works perfectly on Golden Freddy. This also just works perfectly with what we know about the character and the possibility two souls could be possessing Golden Freddy. I'm especially excited to explore how we can give Golden Freddy more of a role throughout the game in Pizzeria compared to a small Easter egg in the original game. But now we can look at two animatronics that weren't in the original FNAF game, but I decided to add them because of the larger pizzeria and I just didn't want the restaurant to feel empty. So first up we have Bub, or as some of you may know him, Sparky. Sparky was the very first hook of the franchise and was even included in the FNAF 1 movie, where Scott Cawthon essentially made this hook's canon. And most recently he was made canon in the games in the form of the prototype Springlock suit Bub that would have been in Fredbear's Family Diner. Bub is just one of those characters that could mesh well with really any environment or pizzeria, and here he's just another animatronic, a part of the attractions. You could either think of Bub as a backup animatronic that could replace any one worst case scenario, or as an animatronic that has always been there but maybe a little bit less popular. And finally we have one of my favorite animatronics on this list, Shadow Freddy. Now Shadow Freddy didn't appear until FNAF 2 and has more of a similar design to Withered Golden Freddy. But here he's a shadow version of the FNAF 1 Golden Freddy, and in my little universe, the fact that Shadow Freddy has the same design as the current Golden Freddy in the pizzeria tells us that they're closely connected. Depending on what you believe Shadow Freddy is, I also just think it makes sense for him to be present in a pizzeria that just has so much tragedy or agony as any other location does where he shows up. Now we can go over room by room, over every single detail and what this place looks like brought to life. In order of how we designed this map, first we have the massive dining area. Here we have a much larger area with much more tables and chairs than the original location. More tables allow for more families to visit the pizzeria, and it works with how much larger the pizzeria is in general. The diner is accompanied by different colored lights leading to the different areas fans can visit, like the restrooms or arcade, and the main dining area is accompanied by purple fluorescent lighting that I think makes everything more vibrant. Up top you'll notice the prize counter with green, blue, and red lights. There are plushies of different animatronics from across the past and current pizzerias open. To the right you'll find a much larger stage to accommodate more guests wanting to get closer. Of course you have Freddy, Bonnie, and Chica being the main entertainment for the dining area. Towards the bottom you can find a simple supply closet with some extra cleaning supplies for the diner, and of course you also have your classic Freddy poster from FNAF 1. From here we can start to go into Foxy's Arcade Cove. I took some inspiration from arcade areas we've seen in games like FNAF 3 and even Security Breach. There are arcade machines lined against the two walls. There is also a ski hockey table, a coin pusher arcade machine, and a few claw machines near the entrance. The arcade machines themselves are designed based on different animatronics, and there's also a dedicated Pirate Foxy arcade machine next to his cove. With the cove itself, this is straight from FNAF 1 since I didn't feel like any changes were necessary. The purple curtains and stars create an almost nostalgic feeling, and Pirate Foxy fits perfectly with this ambiance and this arcade area. Now we can move towards the bottom of the pizzeria where you can find an all-new entrance. You can find normal things like the counter, registers, and some cabinets alongside a phone. But you can also find red booth-style seats matching the 1990 style of the pizzeria. You can also find the menus behind the counter matching the themes of the animatronics and displaying all of the food they have to offer. There are smaller details like some snacks for guests and even a Freddy cardboard cutout that should play some voice lines. This leads us directly to the employee break room with a low blue light setting perfect for all employees. There are red 1980s style kitchen appliances like a fridge and cabinets, alongside red tables with computers for all employees to use. There is also a long foldable table in the center, alongside some lockers on the side for employees, a TV in the corner for entertainment, and a whiteboard near the exit that anyone can use as well. But right next to the break room we have the safe room that every single pizzeria should have at this point. This is where employees would run to if there was some sort of spring lock failure incident, but at this point it's already been boarded up with a fake wall on the arcade side. Now it looks more like some sort of office, fitted with arcade machines, a desk with a computer, and some props on the desk. It won't be seen on the camera system since, as we learn in FNAF 3, cams shouldn't be able to see inside, nor should anyone besides employees know about it. But it will show up on the map itself because to me that is for employees, and we'll find out later how players can actually see inside. Moving left we have one of my favorite additions, the loading dock. Here we have two garage doors where products would be delivered. We have metal shelves filled with boxes, foods, drinks, and other Fazbear products. I especially love this room because I use assets straight from FNAF Help Wanted 2 and a storage-like room, which really makes this room feel like what an actual loading dock would look like in the FNAF universe. But you also have some wooden pallets, a red hand pallet jack, and some forklifts in the corner. Moving up and looking at hallway number 2, we have lights light blue lighting, posters from Fazbear Entertainment sponsors and partners, some shelves and spare monitors, and we also have a Bonnie cardboard cutout stashed away in this hallway. Taking the next employee door, we'll be at the infamous kitchen that we never actually saw in FNAF 1. Here I also used official assets from FNAF Help Wanted 1 and 2, specifically from the Chica repair level which takes place in a kitchen, and from the El Chip level which also has kitchen elements. So I used all of their fridges, shelves, even trash, and these stoves to really make this feel like an official FNAF kitchen. Of course, it's a little messy with pizza or cake scattered around the place, making it feel like it was really being used a part of the pizzeria. Taking another employee door, will be backstage, which can always be accessed behind the stage itself. This is a long hallway filled with shelves of animatronic parts, animatronic hands, body parts, and there are also backup props for each of the animatronics, like Freddy's microphone, Bonnie's guitar, Chica's cupcake, and Foxy's hook. There are also some spare parts of withered animatronics from FNAF 2, like Freddy's head in the corner, but obviously they aren't being used. I also decided to add the prototype FNAF 1 animatronics from Secret of the Mimic. I just thought this would be a really cool addition after this game was released, showing what these animatronics look like at their earliest stage. In worst case scenario, they would maybe even be used until the main animatronics are fixed. They also just add to the horror of the pizzeria and the idea that they might move all of a sudden, or that they might be in different places than you remembered. I also have a lot more FNAF 1 endoskeletons than just one in the original backstage. In my head, any animatronic has to be ready to be switched out for whatever reason, so there should be at least 4 endoskeletons that are able to switch out any of the core 4 characters. Which leads us to where the animatronics would be fixed, parts and service. Now this room might have some mixed feelings because I obviously have the toy animatronics stored here. I don't want it to feel like I'm adding these just for the sake of adding them as some sort of Easter egg. I guess to me and how I think about it, after the FNAF 2 location is closed, the toys would have to be moved somewhere, even before they were dismantled and shoved into the FNAF 3 box. So they could have even been moved to the FNAF 1 location, where their spare parts could have also been used to fix the new animatronics. So you have Toy Freddy and a FNAF 2 endoskeleton sitting in a corner because they haven't been dismantled yet, while other animatronics like Toy Bonnie, Chica, Mangle, Balloon Boy, and the puppet have been dismantled and are maybe even being used somewhere else. There's also some basic tools, spare boxes, and parts of another animatronic in the corner that may or may not be Fredbear. So opening the security door, we'll get to the main office. As I mentioned earlier, I didn't change the structure of this office at all. Instead, I swapped what was already on the desk. So for example, instead of having the FNAF 1 cupcake on the desk, I decided to add Funtime Chica's cupcake. Or with the monitors on the desk, I changed the order of them and added a larger monitor on the left displaying one of the sponsors like we saw in Pizzeria Simulator. Of course, we have the same FNAF 1 poster and drawings like in the old office, but I also decided to add a poster for Fredbear's Family Diner, the earliest restaurant at this point. We also have a paper plate pal from FNAF 6 that is honestly just my personal favorite, and a Golden Freddy plush that I feel brings this office together. With the gameplay, I also really like how everything looks. The changes are subtle, but it fits with what we know about the rest of the lore. So to the left of the office, we have the left hallway, or hallway number 1. This hallway is basically identical to the one we saw connecting the loading dock to the kitchen. It has the same blue lighting with stars, shelves, and monitors, and it's the place where animatronics will start to get near you. This is also where we're gonna have the second supply closet, which actually has spare monitors, flashlights, and even cameras in case something malfunctions with the main office. We also see yet another Fredbear's Family Diner poster advertising what there once was. But now looking at the last set of rooms, we have the restrooms. Here we have the stalls, sinks, mirrors, and even posters of the animatronics. From the restrooms, we're brought into the entrance of these restrooms where we have a yellow neon sign and yellow lights, which also brings us to the next restroom with the exact same layout as the other hallway, just with another animatronic poster. Animatronics like Chica will of course be in these areas just like in FNAF 1. This brings us to the vent right outside the restroom and next to the supply closet. This is where a certain animatronic will enter, and of course they will exit at parts and service right next to your office, so they can essentially reach you the fastest. And design wise, it's just like any other vent we've already seen in the franchise or in any other FNAF game like FNAF 3, gray and rusted. But finally we can start to go over the gameplay, combining all the changes made to the pizzeria and animatronics to show you all how I imagine it would look like finally brought together. So in the office it works exactly like in FNAF 1. You can look to your left and right where you have 2 options to close the doors whenever an animatronic is next to you. And then you can use your light on both sides to light the left hallway and to light parts in service. You have the battery on your top left, and by moving your mouse down you can pull up the cam system. Here you can look around at different areas of the pizzeria with a total of 17 different cams, which might seem like a lot, but it's just a larger pizzeria. You might notice that you can't actually see inside the safe room, but I still decided to keep it on the map itself. Some larger rooms like the loading dock and the backstage actually have 2 cameras showing different angles just to really make sure the player can tell what's going on inside these rooms. So let's look at the mechanics to each of the animatronics and to some rooms. With Bonnie, he essentially works the same way he did in FNAF 1. Bonnie can be seen in a couple of places. He first starts out on the stage and is usually the first one to move. Of course, he can be found in the main dining area and actually in a couple of areas there, where he could be found near the arcade, in the center, or where he's about to reach the hallway. In the hallway, he has a couple of stages getting closer and closer before he actually gets to your office. He can also sneak into the supply closet, so there isn't any change yet, until you find Bonnie at the entrance. If he's here, take a breath, as this is the furthest he can be from your office. I also changed it to where it's now Bonnie in the restroom, so that he's always around the same couple of areas, and instead Chica will be somewhere else. But obviously when he does reach your office, quickly close the door on him, which will force him to go back to his stage or to the entrance. With Chica, she will mainly be in the upper parts of the pizzeria that leads her to the right of your office. Most importantly, she can be all the way to the kitchen, a cam we never actually saw in FNAF 1. She can be in different parts of the kitchen until she moves through the employee door, taking her to the backstage. Here you can watch her through cam 17 and 4, until Chica makes her way up the hallway, taking her to parts and service. From here you can watch her be around the toy animatronics, until she gets closer and closer to your right door until she's completely out of the camera's view. So she'll then be right next to you, allowing you to close the door on her, sending her back to the stage. But say Chica isn't leaving your door and is draining your battery. Well, to get rid of her, that comes with its own risk. I've added a new mechanic taken straight from FNAF Security Breach. Here, when you're on the cam in the kitchen, you can cook pizza by clicking a button that appears on your screen, which will then force Chica to move back to the kitchen. This same mechanic allowed Gregory to escape while Glamrock Chica was eating the pizza in the kitchen. However, you have to stay on the cam while the pizza cooks, which is the downside, and there's a timer for how long you can wait to use it again. Now with Foxy, we're gonna keep his exact same mechanic where he runs from his cove all the way to your office. But this time, not only to make it harder, but so you're actually checking different cameras, Foxy has the ability to run at you from 3 different stages. Usually you only have to keep track of this cam on Foxy's cove, and if he's missing, you just have to close the door on him before he reaches you. So instead, the different stages of Foxy also extend to the main dining area and the hallway. Foxy will be hiding when he's not about to run, so look in these 3 cameras to see when Foxy is going to run when he's exposed and in a running stance, which can happen at any stage, which is why it's important you check all 3 cameras. But if you happen to miss all stages and Foxy is nowhere to be found, quickly close your camera system and close the door. Moving on to Freddy, I've always had some issue with Freddy's mechanics, since he's basically boiled down to cam stalling, as you just have to keep him in one position, and once you get the hang of it, he's pretty easy to avoid. He just doesn't have much of an appearance besides this camera and being on stage, even though he's the face of this game and franchise. So instead, there's 2 things to worry about with Freddy. For one, he can appear in any cam, being the most versatile, and will block the camera's view in different ways, not allowing you to see if an animatronic is behind him. So if Freddy is blocking the camera in the kitchen and Chica's right behind him, you would have no idea, besides having to check every other camera where she can appear, which obviously takes some time. But then in your office and on your right side, Freddy will of course appear here. And when he's at your door, you can close it on him, but he will attempt to lift and open the door, causing a quick time action where you have to spam a certain button to keep the door closed, prompting him to leave. But now we can look at our first new addition to this FNAF game, Bub. Again, this choice was because of the larger pizzeria. I didn't want to make it feel empty by only having 4 animatronics, and we really only see 2 of them. I also didn't want to add too many mechanics, so I apologize if it feels that way, but compared to a game like Ultimate Custom Night, I think it would work pretty well. And on top of that, Bub is pretty easy to deal with, as he will be the only animatronic to use the vent. Bub will be located in the second supply closet, so he'll make his way from the main diner all the way to parts and service, where he can then enter your office through the right side. He is very fast and gets faster as the nights go on, but you can track him on the cam system where a small emoji pops up as he travels through the vents. Simply stop him at the door and he'll go back to his supply closet. Next, taking a look at Shadow Freddy, I really wanted to do more with this character than just a rare Easter egg in one of the cameras, and he actually has a dedicated mechanic with the employee break room. Shadow Freddy also wasn't in the original game, but I feel like it's a really cool inclusion, especially assuming he would also appear in the second and third FNAF game. So here, Shadow Freddy will flash on your screen, which can happen at any moment, which will then slowly begin to drain your power. In later nights, he drains your power much more quickly, so it's important to deal with him as soon as possible. So you'll have to head to the cams and look at cam 10, or the employee break room, where like with many mechanics we've seen in past FNAF games, flash your light at Shadow Freddy, making him disappear. Finally, looking at Golden Freddy, I almost wanted the mechanic behind this animatronic to be the hardest and to have a few parts to it. So Golden Freddy will be stationary in the loading dock area, in a slump position we all know from Five Nights at Freddy's 1. The mechanic here takes inspiration from FNAF 6, where near the entrance you have an electrical switch box. If at any moment Golden Freddy is at an upright position or standing, switch off the electrical box, which will cause a shocked effect in the room, resetting Golden Freddy to his slump position. To make it easier, there won't be slight differences in his movement or posture that you need to pay attention to, like in FNAF 6. There's a clear distinction to the 2 stages, making it clear so when you need to shock him. But if you fail to turn off the switch on time, Golden Freddy will be missing from this room and will now be present in every single camera you're on. He'll switch from cam to cam and will basically become locked to your camera system, and there's no way to escape him. If you try to pull down your camera system, you'll immediately be jump scared. So how do we get him back to the loading dock? Well, you need to follow a certain sound effect leading you to a specific room, where when switching to that camera, Golden Freddy will not follow and will instead go back to the loading dock. The sound effect would get louder and louder depending on which direction it is from your current camera you're in. And to make it a little bit easier, a soundbar effect will appear on your camera system for a brief second telling you where to go. It flashes on your screen quickly, and if you happen to see where it was, go to that camera. But keep in mind, Golden Freddy isn't all that patient, so you only have a limited amount of time or a limited amount of cameras Golden Freddy will follow you until. Now I do hope the brief gameplay doesn't feel like too much either. I know it seems like there's a lot to keep track of and that it could be too much. But how I see it, Bonnie, Chica, and Bub all act the same way and you stop them the same way. Chica just has an extra mechanic only to keep track of her, and Bub is the easiest to keep track of in the vents. Freddy would also be pretty easy to deal with as long as you beat the quick time action, and that's all there really is to him. Foxy works just like how he did in FNAF 1, and you only have to check a few more cameras before you close the door on him like you usually would. Shadow Freddy would happen randomly, and I also think it's pretty easy to get rid of him. I will say Golden Freddy is the only one I do think could be too difficult or too complicated, but I think bringing in all these mechanics together would be difficult but rewarding in a sense. And really, I just want the player to check the cameras more often than FNAF 1, where you really immerse yourself with the different rooms or areas. But hopefully that all gave you a good glimpse into the gameplay, as now I quickly want to go over some aspects of the lore. Now I won't go over every single detail like I've done in the past with my Reboot series or my Reimagined series, which you can check out on the channel. I wanted this video to focus more on the pizzeria itself and on the animatronics, but depending on how this video does, and if you guys really want me to treat this more like a reboot video like Unwithered Truth's amazing series, not only would I remake the FNAF 2 pizzeria and go over all the animatronics and gameplay, but I would also go over all of the lore, minigames, Easter eggs, and anything else I feel to make this game feel complete. And on top of that, I would also include anything you guys feel that was missing from this video. So something I brought up a lot is the safe room. Obviously there's no mechanic or animatronic tied to it, nor is there a cam to view what's inside. Instead, I took inspiration from FNAF 3, and specifically where objects would either appear in front of you on your desk or on the cams. So on any cam, you may notice a familiar yellow bunny hiding and sneaking around the corners before quickly moving from your view. But if you're fast enough and click on this yellow bunny, you'll then be Another thing I decided to add was what happened to Phone Guy after his last phone call. We all know how Phone Guy met his demise in FNAF 1, and it's heavily theorized that this rare game over screen where we see eyeballs popping out of the Freddy suit is Phone Guy himself. So taking inspiration from these two moments, after night 4 and after listening to his last phone call, opening up the cam system and looking at your backstage, you'll find where Phone Guy ended up. These were just some quick things that I feel could add to the horror, but again, if I make another one of these on FNAF 2, I'll go over way more that was missing here. But this is my remake on the FNAF 1 Pizzeria and Animatronics. Now I will say that this is definitely not perfect by any means, and there are some things I definitely want to improve on. So some feedback would be greatly appreciated on anything I could do, and in general on what I could do next with FNAF 2. Today is actually my birthday, so if you made it to the very end, comment down below anything that has to do with cake, and you'll be featured in the next video. So what did you guys think? Comment down below any thoughts or theories. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all next time. Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach, the game arguably filled with the heaviest lore while also having some of the most complicated mysteries from the entire franchise. But we are definitely getting closer to solving this game with the new additions like Secret of the Mimic and the next FNAF game probably finishing a large part of this game's story. And there's one mystery that the community has agreed has been 100% solved after Ruin was released, and a mystery we all moved on from, except me. What if I told you we all overlooked the Security Breach ending? What if it's not the Princess Quest ending that is canon? Instead, like we all thought when Security Breach was initially released, the Burn Trap ending is and has always been canon, and I think I can prove it. So my name is Bronze Films, consider hitting that like and subscribe button, and here's how we're all wrong about FNAF Security Breach. Now, setting the scene in a sense, in 2021, Security Breach was freshly released and it was such a new and exciting experience within the franchise. Running around the pizzaplex and meeting new characters was just really cool, so naturally there was a lot of hype around different endings. There were endings reminiscent of past events in the timeline, endings that were just funny, and endings that were undeniably canon. Most endings were in this comic book style cinematic, and I feel that most people took this style as meaning the ending was not canon and is obviously a what if type of scenario. So in 2021, everyone took the more cinematic type of endings as the more likely ones to be canon, the Princess Quest and Burn Trap endings. Now, the Princess Quest ending did have an animated cinematic, but at the same time had a comic book style drawing to it, so it could have gone either way. But the Burn Trap ending was only animated, and honestly it felt like it continued straight after Pizzeria Simulator. We had Burn Trap, who was definitely Scrap Trap or William Afton, and then we had the Blob, who was definitely Molten Freddy. I mean, look at all these wires. And this whole ending took place in the same pizzeria from Pizzeria Simulator, so how could we not all assume that this was the canon ending, even if Princess Quest ending had one more star attached to it? But as we all know, this theory was completely dismantled with the release of Ruin 2 years after Security Breach. We'll go over how Ruin confirmed the Princess Quest ending was canon towards the end of the video when we talk about how these pieces of evidence really contradict the Burn Trap ending. I mean, I can't tell you how devastated I was when I opened the prize box to find a drawing of the Burn Trap ending, even when I was certain Cassie was about to run into Burn Trap at any moment. So now we can begin to build our case as to why the Burn Trap ending was always the canon one, and then we'll go over all of the issues. In defense of the Burn Trap ending, the first thing we can do is actually take a look at the start of Ruin. Now, assuming this all follows the events of the Burn Trap ending, the collapsed pizzaplex would make perfect sense, and it seems like this is what they were setting up with the Ruin pizzaplex. Even before Ruin was released, whenever we got a teaser showing us the destroyed pizzaplex or animatronics, we all assumed this was because the pizzaplex began to collapse on itself after the sinkhole and FNAF 6 Pizzeria were burned repeatedly, which caused what looked like the whole pizzaplex to sink in on itself. This also made sense when walking around the ruined pizzaplex for even 10 seconds. It was way more believable that all the immense damage, walls, and areas completely missing were because of the fires and not because of an earthquake. Through the newspapers plastered on the entrance of the pizzaplex, we learned that an earthquake had supposedly caused all the damage to the pizzaplex. Right, an earthquake. Honestly, none of us really believe this, and it definitely feels like this was more of a cover-up by Fazbear Entertainment, which makes sense since they probably didn't want anyone finding out they built an entire mall-styled pizzeria over a collapsing sinkhole. Now, I know there's also the answer that it was the blob moving around the foundation of the pizzaplex causing it all to collapse, and we do find this huge hole above the sinkhole that the blob likely used to escape. We then see him near the top of the pizzaplex before running away from Cassie. This answer works just fine, but you could still argue that the blob moving around the walls would not cause this scale of damage, and if anything, it could be a mix of the two answers, where after the burn trap ending and after the pizzaplex would begin to collapse, that's when the blob would take the opportunity to escape and to begin to move around the walls. This could also be why the entrance to the sinkhole looks much different than it did during Security Breach. If the burn trap ending never happened, then why does it look like the sinkhole began to collapse on itself, causing debris to fall near the entrance, exactly where we saw Gregory and Freddy running away from it? It's this debris that causes Cassie to have to go another route than Gregory did in Security Breach, where he just walked to the doors of Freddy Fazbear's pizza place since nothing had collapsed yet. This could also be why burn trap is nowhere to be found in Ruin. Now don't worry, we'll go over the whole burn trap, William, or Mimic debate later, since what we do know for certain is that he just doesn't have any role in Ruin. We don't see the corpse or shell of burn trap anywhere, so this could be because he was essentially absorbed by the blob when he grabbed him by the neck and took him with him to the fire, or the blob just threw him into the center of the fire, making sure he wouldn't come back one more time. But really, these are the small things I wanted to point out with the pizzaplex itself, and the core of the theory truly revolves around the Mimic, or who we can also call M2, and specifically about his voice lines. Now, no dramatic music for this part. I'm not going to try and sound dramatic either, so come close to this imaginary campfire and listen closely. Before I make this claim, remember this video is just a theory, and every theory will have its flaws, but I'm arguing that M2 is only able to put together pieces of someone else's voice to create a new sentence, or only able to repeat sentences already said by someone. Now before you pull out a random page from the books, right off the bat, I think this only applies to the games, so keep that in mind please. So going over a list of evidence, let's look at the Mimic's voice lines as Gregory, and a very specific set of lines where you can definitely tell the Mimic pieced together different phrases to make a new sentence. Take a listen to these voice lines.
Are you there? Are you there? I'm trapped. There was an accident in the raceway. Everything's locked. I can't get out of here. Sinkhole under the raceway. I can hear you. Can you hear me? That rabbit lady's secret room looks like a hideout. I think her name is Vanny? Down there. Sinkhole under the raceway. Cassie, can you hear me? I finally have a clear signal. Almost. There's still one node left that's keeping the underground sealed. Roxy's the final node. You need to deactivate her.
With an example like the first voice line, the first part of the sentence is actually taken straight from Security Breach, and is then stitched in front of a different sentence. Here are even more examples where the Mimic stitches different sentences together, like Cassie's name awkwardly being placed onto another phrase.
Deactivate her and save me! Save me, Cassie, please! It's so dark down here!
Now you may be thinking, sure, but at the same time there are definitely new voice lines from Gregory that we've never heard before, like voice lines about security nodes or escaping the sinkhole that hadn't happened yet in Security Breach. So it's these voice lines that I think the Mimic heard and then repeated back to Cassie. And the only way that would have been possible is if Gregory truly was stuck in the sinkhole at one point in the timeline, and that's exactly when we see the burn trap ending. I think these voice lines did actually come from Gregory himself and were said to Vanessa as he pleaded to get out. Take a listen to even more voice lines where the emotion just feels so real, and it seems like Vanessa's name was replaced by Cassie where it was added in the beginning of each sentence.
Save me, Cassie, please! It's so dark down here! Help! Something grab me! It won't let me go! You have to find me! I'm trapped in the sinkhole under the raceway! Security nodes! Find them and turn them all off! I can't get out until that happens! That thing is here again! I gotta hide! Save me, Cassie, please! Something tunneled out. Broke everything. Now I'm stuck here. Where are you?
There is even a line about something grabbing Gregory and how it was back. If this was the Mimic truly mimicking Gregory's voice, why would he expose that he or something else was in the sinkhole that could be a threat to Cassie? It honestly just looks like he had to work with what he had, and that was these voice lines from Gregory. So if they were actually said, the something trying to grab him could have been Burntrap himself or even the Blob. It could honestly go either way, but personally I think the idea of Burntrap still chasing Gregory and Freddy after somehow escaping the tentacles of the Blob is really cool. And we do even have these cut animations from what look like a chase sequence featuring Burntrap where there's even a death animation, so maybe it's this sequence that took place after the Burntrap ending. Or if the Blob did consume Burntrap, then he would still be attempting to capture Gregory since he definitely did attack him in Security Breach. But really what I think can prove this theory is Secret of the Mimic. We know that there were two Mimic programs used in two very different ways, M1 and M2. M1 was made after Fiona's death to take care of David and would mimic Fiona, but for some unknown reason that many people think is possession, M1 was able to perfectly replicate Fiona's character and identity, essentially becoming an exact copy of her. Then after David's death, M1 was forcing Edwin to create yet another Mimic program that would replace David like M1 replaced Fiona. But Edwin failed many times with this program, where it was not able to perfectly copy someone's personality. Then, M2 did end up mimicking David's behavior, which would then lead to Edwin attacking the Mimic, also causing the endoskeleton to go rogue. But my point with these two Mimic programs is that only M1 was able to actually become the person it was mimicking by being able to copy their voice and personality where they are speaking for themselves with new voice lines. For example, this is what we see when Arnold finds F10 and 4. This is M1 speaking to us directly using Fiona's actual voice and not just repeating already said sentences back to us. Unlike M2, or who would end up becoming the Ruin Mimic, still only repeats already said lines back to us. Like every time the M2 is in a mascot or animatronic, we hear already said voice lines from so said character. Even in the Moon.exe ending, after starting Edwin's story, it's not like the Mimic starts to mimic David as a sort of copy by speaking with his voice. He only mimics his behavior by listening to the story and holding the white tiger plushie. And after you correctly tell the story, that's when the David Mimic walks to the bed and starts to fall asleep before saying this. a voice line that was actually said by David and is not something new from M2. Now, I will say, a moment in Secret of the Mimic that is hard to explain is in one of the voice recordings after an explosion happens in Edwin's office, severely injuring him when the Mimic says this.
There is damage to my office interior, as well as a small fire. No! M2! Response! Emergency! Call for help! Daddy's busy, buddy. Why don't you go outside and play? I can't move. You can't feel my legs. You know, speaking of legs, what do you think? I just finished mine.
It honestly does seem like this is the Mimic himself actually talking to Edwin using his voice, but at the same time you could pass it off as other voice lines that were already said by Edwin. Yes, I know it's talking about an explosion that happened, but this could have happened at any moment Edwin was working on his inventions. And yes, I know the Mimic literally brings up legs which Edwin's were injured, but even then he could have been talking ironically to any of his inventions that did not have legs yet. Maybe. And then what I think should really convince you is the fact that the Mimic repeats a line said from Edwin to David, where he neglects spending time with him in favor of working on his projects. A very brutal moment for Edwin to have to hear what he has said to his deceased son that I think was intentional. It makes it that much more heartbreaking if M2 is repeating things Edwin has already said, showing just how bad of a father he really was. And if M2 was truly taking on the personality and voice of Edwin, I'm sure he could have said a lot of different things out of anger after Edwin had attacked him. Besides arguing for this one moment, never once does the Mimic say anything original using someone else's voice, which means all of the lines from Gregory did actually come from him and are reused. One solution is that maybe the Mimic overheard Gregory talking to Vanessa using the walkie-talkie trying to escape, where he would then repeat those lines to Cassie. But in terms of the infamous burn trap debate, let's look at how this theory would fit with either answer. If the Mimic is burn trap, one idea is that he would have escaped the blob somehow, then lost the suit and flesh, maybe in the office area we couldn't reach in Ruin, and would then follow Gregory around to a deeper level. Like we hear in the reused voice line, something was down there still chasing them, and if it was the Mimic, he just had no choice but to expose that some threat might still be down there. Let's say that Gregory and Freddy ended up in this area where they would be fighting off the Mimic and still trying to escape, which would also be why we see Gregory's backpack near this vent. I honestly imagine Gregory throwing his backpack as some sort of distraction, but this is until Vanessa comes to the rescue and saves them. She would also come with the knowledge of what the Mimic is, and the fact that the Mex's computer right outside this room would be the key to keeping him contained. A lot of us already believe that Vanessa and Gregory were the ones who brought Mexus down to the sinkhole, especially after the FNAF Help Wanted 2 update ending, where we saw Mexus in the back of this van driving off really fast. But now with Secret of the Mimic, it makes much more sense that Mexus was always down there and was never moved, which makes sense when seeing how old and rusted this computer really is. So once Vanessa makes her way down, she would help to trap the Mimic by using an already set up Mexus machine since it's always been there and makes more sense than them dragging it down there somehow. But if the Mimic is not actually burn trap, which you could watch a whole podcast episode on the mystery of burn trap here, it honestly would be a similar premise. Burn trap is absorbed by the blob like we saw, which explains why he's nowhere to be found in Ruin, and it could also be the answer to why we see the blob in Ruin without his glowing red eyes. With any theory around the blob, agony is going to have some role in it. That's why we see all the animatronics have red glowing eyes, but where the agony comes from can be debatable. Either way, in Ruin his eyes aren't glowing anymore, which to me tells me that the blob no longer has any agony, and this definitely could have been because the thing or person who caused all the agony was finally gone. And this is also why the blob never attacks Cassie like they attack Gregory, since again they're simply not angry anymore. But maybe the Mimic was in the Mary Costume Manor part of the sinkhole and was left free after the sinkhole began to collapse, where either he was trapped in another room or he was already being held captive by Mexus, so the collapsing would somehow disable the security nodes, disabling Mexus, allowing him to walk free. He then would run into Gregory, and same thing, is trapped by Vanessa. But an issue I had come across is how they would escape back to the surface. Well, the simple answer is that they would take the same elevator Cassie would take. It was never said that this specific elevator could only be used once. That was only said about this elevator on the other side at the entrance of the sinkhole that was said to Gregory and Cassie. So if they can use the secret elevator whenever they wanted to, it makes sense that they use the same one to escape, and that's how Gregory also knew of this elevator when trying to save Cassie. And this also means that the Gregory who was speaking to Cassie after the Mimic revealed himself is the same Gregory that cut the elevator. I feel like that most people believe that after the static on the mic, the Mimic took over the voice of Gregory once more and he's the one who cut down the elevator, which is fair. But personally, Personally, I've always believed that it was the real Gregory because of main reasons like the fact that we've heard static cut before on the elevator speakers, because the mimic would have no reason to mimic Gregory since Cassie already knew of him, because the walkie-talkie was left behind in this room, and because it would make the story that much more compelling if it was her supposed friend to betray her instead of a villain doing a bad thing. But with the logic of this video, and even if the burn trap ending isn't canon, I am confident in the idea that M2 cannot create new voice lines, so what we're hearing from these voice lines are definitely new and happening in the present time, meaning it was Gregory who cut the elevator. And boom, the burn trap ending is canon. But now we can get to my favorite part of the video, issues that we've all probably thought of by now. The first obvious one is that we literally see the Princess Quest sword through the arcade machine with the shadow of the glitch shot virus plastered on the wall. This looks like a direct result of the Princess Quest ending after Gregory completed the last machine and defeated at least a part of the virus, also freeing a part of Vanessa. Really, the only explanation is that after escaping the sinkhole, they would then complete the last machine. But then, how would they be able to do so while the pizzaplex was collapsing? Or did this room just stay intact? It's hard to say since we'll never know exactly how these events happen in the timeline, but I would argue it's similar to how many people believe that both Help Wanted 2 endings are canon. And then there's the whole burn trap and blob comic book drawing from Gregory that every other non-canon ending received. So honestly, coming up with any explanation feels like I'm picking and choosing my evidence or reasoning. But if I were to give some reasoning, maybe Gregory was drawing what he had saw while being down there, bored and waiting for help before burn trap or the blob would start to go after him. There's other smaller things like the sinkhole itself or the area where burn trap's charging station is located, and not necessarily looking as if it was actually burned by a fire. There's also the chance that Cassie is using the same Vanny mask left behind by Vanessa that only happens in this ending. So this brings me to a final answer and honestly the point of this video. Now I still believe the Princess Quest ending is canon. The point of this video is to simply bring up some evidence that I think can prove that at least parts of the burn trap ending are canon as well. Especially when we're still trying to find answers for burn trap and the blob, looking back to the ending itself where they're featured in can be what we need to solve them. Especially now with the context of new games like Help Wanted 2 and Secret of the Mimic. I'm also making this video because of the chance that the burn trap ending could be featured in the next FNAF game in some sort of way. We now have two pretty major teasers that look like they're from a new location we're all theorizing is a water park attached to the old pizzaplex. So could the blob, mimic, and burn trap all make a return here? I'm sure we'll get some more information when this game is possibly announced during the next anniversary for FNAF. So just because we are certain of one thing in the FNAF franchise, it can't mean we can't go back or look at other answers. And that's why I believe we were all wrong about FNAF Security Breach. But what do you guys think? Is the burn trap ending actually canon, or is this just illusion? Please comment down below any thoughts or theories. Also consider hitting that like and subscribe button, and thank you all so much for watching.
Whoa. What am I looking at here?
Perhaps some things are left forgotten.
That's left
for now.
Oh god.
What the freak is this?
What the freak?
So we've got a locked box here. So we actually can. We've got two locks on it.
Best left forgotten for. What? Okay, that blew my theory out the window.
5 Nights at Freddy's 4, the FNAF game no one can solve, the game compiled of deep and complex mysteries that we are still theorizing about today. Actually no, you've heard the spiel 1,000 times by now. We all know FNAF 4 is just a little complicated where it feels like the community can't find a consensus on a lot of this game. And the best example of this is none other than the box. That's right, you're watching another box theory, and this is probably my 6th or 7th theory I've done on this mystery. And really the main reason for this video is because the infamous box has finally made a reappearance in a lost FNAF game that might have never existed. So my name is Bronze Films, consider hitting that like and subscribe button, and here's yet another answer to the FNAF 4 box. This box and the contents of what's inside has been the center of discussion ever since FNAF 4 was released more than 10 years ago, which is crazy to think about. And recently I'd argue there's been a revival of box theories, with incredible theories by Nicolops and Faden in the theories FNAF 4 Let's Finally Open the Box, and the 5 Nights at Freddy's theory you've never heard. These are incredible, and I mean incredible theories that I highly suggest you all go check out and then come back to this video. They definitely inspired me to revisit the box one more time, but I won't spoil their answers to this mystery. But in order to go over my answer, and something you probably hear a lot when it comes to the box discourse, is how there are multiple answers, meaning what's inside the box has changed alongside the lore. This is something I've talked about before in other videos, where I believe you could realistically have 3 separate answers. One, when the box was originally going to be open in the 2015 Halloween update before being changed. Another answer with the release of Sister Location and Pizzeria Simulator. And a final answer that could relate relate to any modern piece of lore like with the movies, where I feel like they gave us yet another answer that I talked about in this video. But I'm interested in what was inside the box on that fateful day of October 30th, 2015, the first time it was going to be opened. The answer that told us everything we needed to know about the original story and how it changed directions heading into Five Nights at Freddy's Sister Location. We also all know about Scott Cawthon's release statement on Steam that gave the community some small clues. He simply decided not to open the box because no one was able to figure it out. For the first time in the franchise, no one was able to answer this mystery, and Scott Cawthon wanted to keep it that way. From his statement, two things stuck out to fans. Scott claims that what's inside the box are the pieces put together, but would the community accept it that way? We'll of course keep both of these things in mind when going over all of the evidence. So I'm going to present all of the evidence back to back that should reveal a sort of pattern, where Scott Cawthon was basically shoving the answer right in our faces. And it all has to do with who I believe was the face of FNAF until it was slightly changed: Golden Freddy. I actually also think Golden Freddy, or the soul behind this animatronic, has changed a lot, and you can watch why I think that in this video. So if some things are best left forgotten for now, what would need to be stored away? What exactly about Golden Freddy couldn't William Afton fathom the idea of letting out? What did William Afton have to hide away forever following the death of the crying child? Well, it all has to do with masks. Masks we've seen everywhere in the franchise and even recently in the modern FNAF games. Starting with FNAF 3, each of the souls in the Happiest Day minigame are wearing masks corresponding to the animatronic they possessed. During the ending for the same game, we find the animatronic heads, or masks, for the 4 main animatronics. In the bad ending, however, you also find Golden Freddy, as it's also worth noting how every animatronic's right eye is lit, with both of Golden Freddy's eyes being lit as well. This of course means you didn't free the souls in the animatronics, but if you take the long route and complete every single secret minigame leading you to Happiest Day, you'll receive the good ending, where you'll no longer find the animatronic's eyes lit and Golden Freddy is actually missing completely. In FNAF 4, you have each of the bullies wearing a mask of the different animatronics, with Michael and his Foxy mask probably being the most popular one. From here, there's almost a shift in where the lore headed, so we didn't see these familiar masks until FNAF Help Wanted, the start to the Mimic era. Here you can collect familiar and new masks like the Vanny mask, and in Help Wanted 2, you can even find what is supposedly the exact same mask from Bonnie Bro, telling us exactly who this player is and how they're even connected to the current major protagonist. So why all these masks? Well, I'm more interested in the one that's missing. Kinda. In FNAF 1 and 2, how does Golden Freddy jumpscare us? Sure, we see the entire animatronic in our office, but only the animatronic head attacks us, especially in FNAF 2 when only Golden Freddy's head jumps at us. Compare this to literally any other animatronic who in a sense jumpscares us normally, so why would Scott Cawthon make this consistent design choice? Then in FNAF 3, and before you complete the Happiest Day minigame, every time you encounter this spirit, which is strongly believed to be the crying child, he's always missing the Golden Freddy mask. You'll find him at the end of a minigame or even at the end of the Happiest Day room without his mask, unlike every other soul who was already wearing a mask. Even everyone at the tables has a mask on. It isn't until after the minigames are completed that the crying child will then get his Golden Freddy mask before being freed, allowing the mask to fall slowly to the ground alongside the others. And like I said earlier, it will then be missing from the good ending. So why does it appear after he's freed in the minigame but disappear in the ending? In FNAF 4 we have a similar situation. Where is a Golden Freddy or Fredbear mask? Now I'm not saying there should have been another bully with a Fredbear mask. Instead, it should already be somewhere. Think about it. At this point, the faces of the franchise are Fredbear and the animatronics of the newly opened Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. You would assume that there would be merch for Fredbear, like a cardboard cutout that we saw in FNAF Ruin or posters from FNAF Security Breach. Ignoring Spring Bonnie because, you know, he's just there, Fredbear would most definitely have merch, especially in his own restaurant. Especially if we consider that the diner is supposed to mirror the events of Happiest Day, we are missing one mask. So let's say that there's a chance the missing mask belonged to the crying child, his favorite toy before he was afraid of the animatronics. We know the crying child saw something which is its own mystery, but before this would happen, is it really that far-stretched to say that he was a fan of Fredbear? There was even the Fredbear and Friends TV show playing at one point inside the Afton family house. Maybe it used to be the crying child's favorite show, since I don't really see Michael watching this show at his age. And in a game like FNAF Ultimate Custom Night, it's heavily theorized that the crying child is represented through Nightmare Fredbear. Obviously this could be because of the bite of 83, but nonetheless I think we can argue that they're closely connected beyond just possession. And this brings me to my final answer, the thing that has been present and missing in different ways throughout the 4 main Five Nights at Freddy's games. What's inside the FNAF 4 box and what was going to be revealed to us during the Halloween update was the Golden Freddy mask. I'm sure some of you already knew that this was going to be my answer, or maybe some of you remember this answer from a past video, but this time there's even more evidence from the FNAF 2 movie that we can talk about. In December I made a video talking about how the box was shown and opened before Vanessa's dream sequence, where what's inside were trophies from William Afton's victims that enhanced her dream sequence. A lot of the trophies looked like toys, which is why fans believe that the box itself is actually a toy box. A box either filled with the victims' favorite toys or the toys they had on them when they were murdered. So translating this information over to the games and also treating this as a toy box would actually be the crying child's toy box, at one point most likely filled with different toys. But after his death, William would reuse it to hold his favorite one, the Fredbear mask. So circling back to FNAF 3, and if this is really the crying child, the key component or the thing that the crying child gets back allowing him to become free is the mask. Until the pieces were put together, the crying child wasn't able to receive his mask. I've seen a lot of people theorize that what's inside the box is Happiest Day itself. Especially since in FNAF World, after completing the clock ending, the Fredbear plush tells you that the pieces are in place for you, all you have to do is find them. The pieces are of course the Happiest Day minigames, where in FNAF World the player actually sets them up for the player in FNAF 3 to complete. So I'm arguing instead of the pieces being put together resulting in Happiest Day as a whole, it resulted in giving the crying child what he needed to move on. So with the endings and how I see it, in the bad ending the mask is still there because it wasn't metaphorically given back to the crying child. Versus in the good ending it's missing because it was given back, and in that sense the eyes would no longer be glowing. But for even more evidence that the Golden Freddy mask, or that a mask in general, is inside the box, let's look at the modern FNAF lore. In Help Wanted you could find the masks of the 4 main animatronics alongside Balloon Boy and Mangle in the Trick or Treat level, a part of the Curse of Dreadbear DLC, where you use them to fight off the corresponding animatronics. They were also collectibles, and lore-wise were important enough to be coded into the VR game. At the end of the DLC we all know you collect the Vanny mask, which leads to the character of Vanny in Security Breach. From here we know other characters and even employees had Vanny masks, allowing them to access a virtual network only they could see. And it's this network in FNAF Ruin where we could find 2 very specific collectibles, a Foxy and Bonnie mask. I believe that whenever someone enters the Vanny network, they can bring something with them that is close to them. That's why collectibles exist within the network. They're all the objects of everyone else who has worn a mask. This could even include Michael Afton if he's still alive in the modern games, since if he was really hiding around the pizzaplex, it makes perfect sense that he would use the Vanny mask to move around undetected. His object that he brought along with him is of course his Foxy mask, the closest item to him. And what really ties all of this together is Help Wanted 2. When taking a look at the Princess Quest ending, the player collects memories from the missing children incident, which are in the form of plushies which are made with masks of each of the victims. Get it? Even more masks. But after collecting them all and after playing the Princess Quest machine, these plushies now lie on graves. The player then has the option to light each grave, as after lighting them in a very specific order, we can find a memory of our own. In this secret room we find a chest, and when opening it, inside is a Bonnie mask with the text, "This looks familiar," right above it. It's been theorized that we play as Bonnie Bro from FNAF 4, and the reason it looks familiar is because it's the same one he wore on that night the crying child was murdered. And after finding the mask, the player is able to free Vanessa from the control of Glitch Trap. At its core, the masks are the closest things to a person, while at the same time representing trauma and pain surrounding that mask. Especially with what we know about both of these masks. They were worn on that fateful night full of tragedy and fear. And if you haven't noticed yet, the events of this game almost directly parallel FNAF 3 and Happiest Day. The player collects memories and completes them, which leads them to finding a new memory or a memory of their own, which ends with an innocent soul or person being freed from the hands of William Afton or from his creation. So this could definitely mean that the chest is a parallel to the box, meaning inside the box must also be a mask that is a memory, a mask that means something, a mask that once again belonged to the crying child. And from the perspective of William Afton, of course the crying child's mask would be best left forgotten for now. William wouldn't be able to accept what had happened, and story-wise I don't think he would ever actually open it. Instead, like in the FNAF 2 movie, it would be their child to reopen the box and to face what he had directly or indirectly caused. In the movies, this was Vanessa, and in the games, I think we can safely say it would be Michael Afton. Now, I can't say for sure if he literally opened it, but he definitely metaphorically opened it in FNAF 3. I'd say most of us by now agree that Michael is the protagonist in FNAF 3, meaning he's the one putting the pieces together, resulting in the crying child getting his mask back. And in terms of the second clue Scott Cawthon gave us, if the community would accept it that way, it could also work with this answer. At this point after FNAF 4's release, one of the most popular theories of what was inside the box was the body of the crying child, an honestly intense and horrifying idea. So would fans be happy with a simple mask being inside instead, something that has already been shown to us time and time again? Wouldn't fans want more? More lore, even a teaser for what fans wanted from FNAF 5? Well, we did technically get FNAF 5 in the form of FNAF World, which I'm so happy is finally getting the recognition it deserves. Here the box was also being planned to be opened, as in the game files you can find a sprite of the box finally opened. And honestly, I believe it would have been the exact same answer as from the Halloween update. This game is already heavily centered around the crying child, with references to this character in FNAF 4, one of the main characters being the psychic Freddy plush who has extremely similar lines that were said to the crying child, and the fact that it's theorized that the map for this game is literally the crying child's brain. So how perfect would it be where after the player has set the pieces in place and after the player puts the pieces together in FNAF 3, we would get the box open revealing a Fredbear mask. It could have even been modeled in the same art style as FNAF World, giving us a metaphorical and literal answer. But this all brings me to what inspired me to create this video in the first place, the box being mentioned in a FNAF piece of media in the year 2026. Now this happened through the Ultimate Guide 2.0, where this book and its contents can honestly be its own video, but I want to focus on Chica's secret party. Hopefully by now you've seen some videos on this lost game, but if you haven't, the guidebook describes it as, quote, Chica's throwing a party. At this party there are plenty of guests to feed sweet cupcakes and some very unwanted guests that crashed the party. Chica's secret party was very nearly a secret game, as it was only available online for a short time, 3 days to be precise, on scottgames.com back in 2016. Alongside the synopsis we had a detailed description of the entire FNAF game, revealing appearances from Fredbear, Golden Freddy, Bonnie, Deskman, The Box, and more. So there's a couple questions surrounding this supposed game, like is it even real? Is it a new ARG created by Scott? Is it a teaser for the next FNAF game? Is it FNAF World 2? Will it ever be released? To me, I could see literally any of these possibilities being reality, but for the sake of the box, let's say this was all true. Let's say that there was actually a game out there before Scott deleted it. If this was the case, the box would have been opened once again. Now, although Golden Freddy and Fredbear were a big part of this game, I don't actually think the answer would revolve around this character or even the crying child. At this point in 2016, I think the story shifted more to Michael Lafton. We don't know exactly when it released, but to me it makes sense it would have released after Sister Location sometime in November or December, a year before Pizzeria Simulator. That's because we see heavy imagery for Midnight Motorist, like the exact same outside area and window in this image. So this possibly could have been the very first version of what Midnight Motorist would have been before it was a minigame and part of a separate game. And this next idea is debatable, but what's one of the main focuses of this minigame through who the runaway is? Well, it's probably Michael Lafton. So in a dedicated game to the Afton house and where we still find the runaway footsteps, is it that hard to believe the box was going to contain something related to this character? We would have just gotten this crazy ending where Michael is looking for his father, so Chica's secret party would have almost been a continuation to the story of Michael and William just as a prequel. That is also really debatable though, since we don't really know what the original plan for this game was. So I really can't stress that enough, but it's all speculation, and honestly it's impossible to know what was really going on or what was intended by Scott Cawthon. However, during one of Dogwo's live streams, Scott was asked about Chica's secret party and said this, which is a pretty classic Scott answer. I see this as we will get an answer someday, or maybe even the game itself. If these pages were a mistake or anything like that, Scott would have addressed it by now like he's done with past errors he felt the community should have known about. So there is definitely some chance we'll get an answer someday, even if it is in what Scott had planned in 2015. But this brings me to the other big question of the video and where the title came from. Does it even matter? Does it really just solve nothing? Honestly, it depends on how you want to look at it, but unlike other mysteries or even games, solving the box wouldn't really tell us everything. Instead, it tells us about Scott Cawthon's thought process of where the story was headed or what characters we should focus on the most. Even if Scott Cawthon gave us all the answers to what's inside tomorrow, it would only tell us more about things we already knew. It wouldn't be a breaking point to the lore or story. I think that's exactly why it was handled the way it was in the FNAF 2 movie. Opening the box wasn't this big dramatic moment. Instead, the contents of the box were used to help explore Vanessa's character and backstory. The contents were used to dwell deeper into her trauma related to William Afton. Same thing with the games, it would only tell us more about certain characters. And if we do get Chica's secret party, I obviously do hope we get to finally find out what's inside, finally putting it rest to a 10-year mystery. And the answer might be something we all saw coming or something that we could have never expected that would all do the same for the lore. So to that, this is my answer to the FNAF 4 box that solved nothing. I hope you all enjoyed another FNAF 4 theory, and what do you guys think? What's inside the FNAF 4 box? Will we ever really find find out, and does it solve anything? Make sure to comment down below any thoughts or theories. But now I want to take some time to thank everyone who stuck around to the very end of this video, where I reimagined the FNAF 1 Pizzeria and Animatronics. If you haven't checked out that video, please do if you'd like, as at the end of that video there was a secret word you had to comment in order to be shouted out in this video, which is everyone you're seeing up here on screen. So thank you all so much for supporting the video and for sticking to the very end. I'm honestly so grateful that there were even this many people to add, and I'm so excited for you to all see what I'm working on for the FNAF 2 Reimagined video. So please consider hitting that like and subscribe button, and thank you all so much for watching. Five Nights at Freddy's is now made up of 11 to 12 mainline games depending on how you see it, with the release of FNAF Secret of the Mimic. But more than a year after it's released, many of us can't help but ask what's next. Will we get a new mainline FNAF game, a DLC, or even a game like FNAF World 2? Well, today I want to explore every single option there is that includes sequels, a game based on one of the franchise's most complicated mysteries, and a game based from what looks like to be the very first teaser by Steelwool Studios. So my name is Bronze Films. Consider hitting that like and subscribe button for more videos like this, and let's try to solve the next FNAF game before it's even released. Briefly setting the scene of where we left off, I'd say the two most important parts are from the endings of FNAF Ruin and Secret of the Mimic. In Ruin, the canon ending is still debatable, but I think for the most part the community agrees that the elevator ending is the canon one, where either Gregory or the Mimic cut the elevator, not allowing Cassie to escape. She falls back into the sinkhole with her fate left a mystery until we hear this.
Cassie.
From here, we would get Secret of the Mimic, where one of the main taglines for this game was, "To see the future, sometimes you need to understand the past." So it was clear we would get a Mimic origin type of game, and it definitely delivered, with the introduction of the Murray family, familiar faces making a return, and finally getting some answers to the modern FNAF lore. Now this game actually has 3 different endings, with each of them having their own group of fans who believe it's the canon one. We of course have the bad ending, the parachute ending, and the moon.exe ending, with all of them honestly ending in some sort of cliffhanger, which was surprising. I feel like we all kinda assumed that Secret of the Mimic would directly lead to Ruin somehow, even with the gap in the timeline. I always thought there would be a time lapse of the Mimic stuck somewhere in MCM, which would then lead to him in the caves under Freddy Fazbear's Pizza Place. So really we're left with 2 cliffhangers, and now we can theorize about where FNAF is headed, or maybe what Stu was planning next. I'd argue the most obvious answer is FNAF Security Breach 2 or Ruin 2, picking up right after the end of FNAF Ruin. Now you could look at this in a couple of ways, but to me, following the events of the elevator ending, let's say that Cassie did survive, and it's now her and Roxy trying to escape. Obviously the Mimic would still be a major threat, but this time we could see the Mimic wear familiar costumes or characters. One of the biggest theories around Ruin 2 is the fact that the elevator falling down would actually crash into yet another part of the sinkhole that Pizzaplex was built over. What if, at the end of the game, Cassie wakes up in an abandoned MCM/Circus Baby entertainment and rental location? It's already been theorized that multiple locations are all under the Pizzaplex, or are even the same in some ways. We theorize about this because we find similar assets like walls or bricks between the sinkhole and MCM. I personally always think back to these 1970s style TVs found in the trash area in Security Breach, and what do we find in Secret of the Mimic, which takes place in 1979? That's right, we find these exact, and I mean exact same TVs. This just isn't a coincidence, and makes sense when considering we find the Mimic and mascots that we could also find in Secret of the Mimic. Just imagine the Mimic chasing us in the remains of MCM, maybe even wearing the mascots left behind like Chica or Moon. He could even wear the remains of Jackie, since we never found out what happened to this animatronic unlike every other mascot after their chase sequence. This could allow us to learn even more about the Murrays, about David's death, about F10 and 4 if they are different from Nexus, and we can even learn where the Mimic has been all these years, also telling us which ending is canon. But if this doesn't happen, or if it's only part of Ruin 2, the second half could be Cassie exploring what's left of Circus Baby's entertainment and rentals. A lot of us believe this because it's very likely Edwin's mansion turned into the Afton family house, and what do we know from Tales from the Pizzaplex novels is right under this FNAF warehouse? Well, it's the Sister Location bunker, which matches perfectly with the layout of MCM, since Edwin had tunnels connecting his factory to his house, so it's these tunnels that would be turned into the bunker. Now this would mean we could see the Mimic wear the shells of any of the Funtime animatronics, including the one and only Circus Baby. Cassie could also navigate her way using the Vanny mask, maybe revealing parts of the bunker or animatronics we've never seen before. This would also be a perfect way to expand on the original and new lore like we saw in Secret of the Mimic. Who knows what we could find in William's bunker in a 3D environment? We could get some huge reveals around the earlier characters to possibly solve some of the original lore like we've been doing. From here, I think it's safe to assume that Vanessa, Gregory, and Freddy will have some role as well. I'm sure they will either venture back to the sinkhole to save Cassie, or they will be waiting for her at the top when she escapes. I also personally believe that Michael Lafton will be with them, especially if Cassie does explore Circus Baby's location. Michael Lafton knows all about it and could be the one to guide her. But if you'd like, you can watch this video to see why I think he's even alive. But there is one major issue with Ruin 2 I see being brought up a lot, which is that this would be the fourth project taking place in the Pizzaplex. I think at some point fans would just want to explore a new location that isn't the Pizzaplex. Even if we do get to see MCM or Circus Baby's location, these are already places we're familiar with. So this brings me to the second option, and a place Duo has been teasing since the very first Help Wanted game, Fall Fest. Let's say Cassie and the Mimic do end up escaping. This is when they would both end up wandering into a modern version of Fall Fest. We know some sort of autumn event is still around from the Pizzaplex novels, so this could be our new location where Cassie and probably the rest of the gang try to hunt down the Mimic who's running around using different mascots. There could be elements to it where you have to stop the Mimic before he hurts anyone or try to lure the Mimic out of Fall Fest somehow. But like Ruin 2, there is one major issue with a Fall Fest game dedicated to only the modern lore, that there are just too many unanswered questions from the past. We know Fall Fest has been around for a very long time, since at least the early 1970s, and eventually one of the Fall Fest would have been a part of Fiona's death one way or another. And in that sense, there are endless possibilities of lore stories that could have happened throughout these Fall Fests. So what if instead the next FNAF game was Five Nights at Freddy's Help Wanted 3? Here this wouldn't actually take place in modern Fall Fest. Instead, it would still follow Cassie in the sinkhole like Help Wanted 2 followed her dad in the FNAF 6 pizzeria. Now I know I just said it shouldn't take place in the Pizzaplex, but hear me out. What if after the elevator crash, Cassie would wake up in a new area of the sinkhole that was some sort of simulation attraction for Fall Fest, where she would find a VR mask like in those VR roller coaster machines. So inside would be a virtual tour of Fall Fest over the years, where every new level or task would take place in a different year of Fall Fest. You could play as a repair worker in the year 1970, 1975, or even 1983, or other years that have relevant lore. At the surface, these levels could look normal, where you defend yourself against mascots or animatronics while completing some task, but in the background there could be lore, and I mean tons of it. For example, depending on the date, we can learn what animatronics were around at what certain times. Like, could the Funtime animatronics have been around much earlier than any of us could have expected and were rented out to this carnival? Or were Fredbear and Spring Bonnie rented to this carnival as well? Imagine having to face Fredbear or even Circus Baby in Fall Fest while trying to fix a ride. We can also learn more about a fire or fires that have definitely occurred at Fall Fest. There is specifically one fire that most likely took the life of Fiona Murray that could have its own dedicated level where we could finally learn what caused it or who caused it. There are a lot of possibilities, and really the only issue is that it would almost act as a sort of filler game. Help Wanted 3 wouldn't necessarily move the story forward like most of us would hope for. Sure, the ending could set up Cassie escaping or Gregory coming back for her, but still we would have to wait again for yet another game showing us what's next. So a perfect mix of a new setting and a game that would move the story forward is Freddy Fazbear's Water Park. No, I'm not kidding, this could be a real possibility, and here's how. A few days ago, Steelwood Studios posted these two images with the caption, "No secrets, no hidden clues, no teaser, no countdown, just 3 differences. Probably. How fast can you spot them?" In these two images, we saw a pool room, or what could be an area to a larger water park that has chicken floaties, swim noodles, and of course a pool. At the surface, it seemed like this was just another Steelwood post, since they do post pretty often, and not everything is related to FNAF. And I know it literally says in the description that this is not a secret, teaser, or countdown, but the way they added probably makes it to where I can't help but dig for some lore. We even did an entire stream on this image, and if you were in that stream, watch out for your idea popping up soon. So first of all, obviously we have the checkered floor that is classic FNAF, and why would a checkered floor even be in a pool area? We also have these wooden barrels that I immediately connected to the balloon barrels from Pizzeria Simulator. You could also argue that we can connect the noodle colors to characters from the franchise, that the floaties resemble characters from the modern lore, like this one having similar colors to Glamrock Chica, or this floaty resembling Glamrock Freddy. You could also connect this chicken floaty to obviously Chica, or to this mascot from Secret of the Mimic, with the only difference being the jester hat. So we definitely have some FNAF imagery, and I hope we can all agree in some sense. So what could this mean? Well, right off the bat, I definitely believe this would be a modern location, with the floaties resembling newer characters, and I can't imagine a water park being around the earlier locations. And from the tales from the Pizzaplex novels, we know a water park exists in this universe named Freddy's Fantasy Water Park. This water park has attractions like Freddy's Sea Life Aquarium, Bonnie's Sea Ponds, Freddy's Treasures in Eatery, Chica's Ferry Boats, and Foxy's Island water slides. In the books, this attraction is 2 towns over the Pizzaplex, so it's not that hard to imagine that this water park exists in the game's timeline and where the next game could take place. Maybe it could be way closer to the Pizzaplex in the games, so after the Mimic and Cassie escape, they would both wander onto this water park, where it's then a similar premise to a Fall Fest game, where they simply have to stop the Mimic. This water park could also somehow be the place to give us answers from the past, since someone still has to be running it, like Edwin Murray. But here are some other really cool ideas from the stream me, Var, and unnamed security guard hosted. First, we have the idea of, what if this pool thing is Cassie's mind trapped in a virtual simulation by M1 by G. James Legend 101. This could be similar to the Help Wanted 3 idea and could work honestly either way. The idea of M1 still being around and trapping Cassie's mind in a virtual reality is horrifying and could be really cool to explore. We also have this idea from Mr. 3D Gaming, quote, I think I've got about 2 ideas for now. Either it's the water park from Tales and we're getting a game based off of that, or Fazbear renovated the underground cave and ruined into this new water park. Now, the first idea we've kinda already talked about, but I personally love the second idea of the caves being remodeled into a water park, which is very much in Fazbear's fashion. The only issue I see is the timeline with Cassie being stuck in the caves. Would this water park be built at the same time she's there with no one noticing? Or is it that when they start construction, she's found and is able to escape? It could definitely work if the park is still in progress, but in this picture it definitely does look more complete. We also have an idea from Toasted Perfection, quote, yeah, someone mentioned the blob to me as well. I'd love to see the tentacles through the pipes in a water slide. Now, we've talked a lot about the Mimic, but someone we can't forget about who's still in the Pizzaplex and in the foundation of it is the blob. We see him at the top of the Pizzaplex when Cassie goes down these stairs, telling us that he was able to escape the sinkhole, since we also see this massive hole that he presumably made and escaped with. So he could also either make his way to the water park or will be present while it's being built, becoming another threat we have to watch out for, or he can even become an ally, since his eyes were no longer glowing red, maybe telling us that he's no longer filled with rage and agony. So imagine his tentacles or the head of Funtime Freddy chasing us through pipes and even slides. It's just hard to imagine that Stu will completely forgets about this character, so there's a big possibility he'll show up in this next game no matter what it looks like. So I think it's pretty obvious that there are tons of options for a FNAF water park game, and all we can do now is wait and see if we do get more teasers related to water. But now we can look at another option that is very different from the ones we've talked about so far, but still very popular, Chica's Secret Party / FNAF World 2. Maybe by now you've seen some videos on this supposed lost FNAF game, but if you haven't, the guidebook where it's found describes it as, quote, Chica's throwing a party. At this party there are plenty of guests to feed, sweet cupcakes, and some very unwanted guests that crash the party. Chica's Secret Party was very nearly a secret game, as it was only available online for a short time, 3 days to be precise, on scottgames.com back in 2016. Alongside the synopsis, we had a detailed description of the entire FNAF game, revealing appearances from Fredbear, Golden Freddy, Bonnie, Deskman, The Box, and more. I talked about this more in detail in my FNAF 4 box video that you can all check out here, but is this supposed to be what's next? Is the reason Scott included this in the Ultimate Guide 2.0 and is avoiding questions about it because it's going to be released one day? If this is the case, it would obviously do wonders for the community being able to solve the original FNAF lore, but what about the modern story? I don't think this would let us learn more about the Mimic or Cassie's fate in the sinkhole, so what if this was only half of the story? What if, like in FNAF Pizzeria Simulator, where in the beginning we had a deceiving intro minigame, Chica's Secret Party would be the false beginning to another FNAF game, FNAF World 2. Like the first FNAF World, it would carry the story forward by focusing on one character, a victim whose plushie is very close to them, the Cry David. David. Like FNAF World, it would take place in David's brain, where we could honestly play as anyone close to David, navigating his world, finding secrets and lore. Or what if we played in the Mimic's brain or programming, where throughout the game it seems that we are playing in David's brain, but the entire time it was the Mimic mimicking David and his memories, convinced that he's actually David. This could tell us even more about this character, and they could even find a subtle way to tell us where he was for decades while the original lore was happening, and which secret of the Mimic ending was canon. And also, how cool would it be to play a FNAF World style of game with new characters like the Glamrock Animatronics and all of the mascots from Secret of the Mimic, or really anyone missing from the first game? I love the idea of always betting on FNAF World 2, and even if it isn't what's directly next, I hope it happens eventually because it would be such a perfect way to expand on the Murrays and on the Mimic. And Scott Cawthon did say they were working on a sequel, so you never know. But these are 4 of what I think are the most likely scenarios for future games for the FNAF franchise. Now I know it's been a while since we've gotten any news, and the franchise has definitely hit some road bumps recently with Secret of the Mimic VR, rumors of 5 Laps at Freddy's being cancelled, and the general lack of news that has made some fans worried for the future. I'm honestly not too worried, but I do definitely get why some fans are. I'm pretty confident we'll get something in the next FNAF anniversary coming pretty soon, and if we don't get anything by then, I'm very hopeful something will happen before the end of the year. But with that said, what do you guys think? What is the next FNAF game, and what is Steel Wool teasing? Please comment down below any thoughts or theories, as I love reading through the comments. Also consider hitting that like and subscribe button, and thank you all so much for watching. Five Nights at Freddy's Help Wanted was released more than 6 years ago, which is just crazy to think about when considering all the new lores in games since then. And it can even be argued that Help Wanted was a soft reboot to the franchise, bringing in an entirely new side to the lore and timeline that a lot of us grew up with and remember that is now being known as the Mimic Arc. But what if Help Wanted was entirely different? What if Help Wanted was a classic FNAF game, incorporating elements, game mechanics, and lore from Scott Cawthon's games that we all know and remember? Well, join me today as I cover a fully animated game concept of what a point-and-click version of this game would look like that I'm calling FNAF Help Wanted Reimagined. A game concept that will go over the mechanics, gameplay, different nights, endings, Easter eggs, lore, and minigames, all creating my version of this FNAF game. But for a quick disclaimer, by no means am I saying that this is what Help Wanted should have been or the Steel Wool Studios should have done this instead. I absolutely love Help Wanted, and not only is it one of the scariest FNAF games, but in my opinion it has some of the best lore that every future FNAF game would build off of. This is just a fun different take on the game using the past FNAF games as inspiration. So what does a quote-unquote classic FNAF game look like? Well, I actually think it's a few things that I've tried to incorporate with this game concept. Number 1, it should include a point-and-click style of gameplay that we saw with the first 7 FNAF games. Typically it's in an office with hallways or vents surrounding the room. Number 2, it should include a cam-like system that shows us the route of animatronics or threats to help us survive. And number 3, like the name suggests, there should be at least 5 different nights of the player fighting off animatronics, with each one progressively getting harder and a chance of there being bonus nights as well. And finally, number 4, there's usually lore and a story, where luckily here we already have a lot of lore from the actual game to go off of. So combining all of this with Help Wanted, we get this final product. To set the scene, converting Help Wanted into an office-based click and point game was honestly a bit difficult. As with a game like Secret of the Mimic, it was way easier, and you should totally check out that Reimagined project after this one. In a sense, Help Wanted is already technically a classic game, with game modes featuring gameplay from the main 5 games, especially with something like Help Wanted Mobile, as originally my plan was to have each night take place in a different FNAF game, but again that would just be Help Wanted Mobile. There had to be something more and something different, so this game will take place in the hub and will be drastically different to just the VR game. Here you'll find yourself in the exact same area from Help Wanted, just with some slight adjustments. The player in the game hub, where you can select different mini games, will both be turned around and will now be facing the prize counter. Tables and chairs around you will also be slightly different, using props from past games and themes like Rockstar Animatronic themed cups and plates alongside balloons from Pizzeria Simulator. There will also be some hints and Easter eggs to past and future locations that you can keep an eye out for once we're in the office. But this is your classic office. This is where you're going to be fighting off animatronic one night after another. But what about the cam systems and all the levels from Help Wanted? Well, because we're in virtual reality and in a sense this hub is in Rio, it's hard to incorporate a traditional camera system showing off the location or pizzeria when there isn't one. So instead there will be 5 cams that feature the first 5 main FNAF games, the same way Help Wanted featured these games, with levels mirroring their actual gameplay. So in virtual reality you would be traveling from game game to game, stopping animatronics from escaping their game and making their way into the main hub or into your office. But obviously playing 5 FNAF games at once would basically be impossible, so you'll instead perform the basic function of each game that I'll go over in the gameplay portion. And don't worry, the other levels in Help Wanted like the repair stages are still in this game, just in a different mode I'll talk about later. So now that you hopefully have a feel of the basics of this game, now let's jump straight into it, starting with how the game would actually begin. Of course, like the earlier FNAF games, we have to start off with a Help Wanted ad newspaper. Here Fazbear Entertainment is looking for someone to participate in an all-new Fazbear experience that involves a volunteer playing a new VR game over the course of a week. The VR game is being advertised as the brand new start for the company that revolutionizes how you see the animatronics, an all-new horror experience. After this, I would honestly keep the start of the base Help Wanted game, where Hand Unit perfectly lays out the foundation of the new lore of the franchise and lore that perfectly explains the soft reboot. This horror VR experience also just works with my classic version of it. The VR game used to dismiss the fictitious events of the franchise fit in with a volunteer playing this game for 5 nights. So after the newspaper and the introduction segment, you'll be thrown right into your office and right into the gameplay. Now, one of the last things I want to bring up before we get to the gameplay are the nightly phone calls, another pretty important aspect from the original games. Here the phone calls are replaced by Hand Unit checking in on you as you navigate the VR game. He'll be updating you on Fazbear, their plans on expansion, and will give you more context to how the nightly system works.
Welcome to the Five Nights at Freddy's virtual experience, brought to you by the one and only Fazbear Entertainment. We hope you enjoy your stay. And thank you for joining the team once more, Mr. Smith. Remember, the rules are simple. Keep the VR mask on throughout the entirety of your 6-hour shift. Do not remove it. And repeat this until Friday to receive payment. Take this as some sort of experiment, where we, the Fazbear team, want to study the long-term effects that the mask and VR game can have on the human brain. But don't worry, there is absolutely nothing to worry about. So don't take it off. Good luck, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.
Now, last thing before we jump in, I actually want to mention how Helpy will be in this game, which I was really excited to add. Here he'll appear on your screen like in Ruin, giving you tips on how the game works, like what buttons do what, and the general layout of the game.
We hope you enjoy your stay, and thank you for joining the team once more, Mr.
How many times do I need to hear this same speech?
You have your left and right hallway both equipped with the light that can be turned on with the respective buttons, but like with any game, they will use power, so use them wisely. To your right, you'll find Foxy's Cove, where only the different Foxy animatronics throughout the 5 games can appear. To your left, you'll find another hallway and entrance. Here the advantage is that whatever animatronic teleports here, they'll be much closer to you than the other and have a higher chance of jump scaring you. In front of you, you'll also find this breaker. Whenever an animatronic is in front of you, pull the lever which will reset the VR game and will send the animatronic back to their designated game. So looking back to the center console, this will be how you will change between games. Pressing down on the spacebar, you will now be inside the FNAF 1 game. Again, playing 5 games at once would be too much, so you wouldn't be checking all the cams, playing a music box, or checking a closet. You'll just be completing the basic function. In FNAF 1, here you can look around your office and you'll have to check the lights in both hallways while also closing the doors on any animatronics when they're near your office. If you fail to do this, they will get past you and will appear in your office. In FNAF 2, the basic function will simply be to wear the Freddy mask whenever there's an animatronic in front of you. Again, if you don't do it or if you time it wrong, they will get past you. In FNAF 3, you can look around your office just like in FNAF 1. Springtrap and the Phantoms will appear on your left doorway and through the vent system on your right side. So to get rid of them, use the system panel to play Balloon Boy's voice in a different room. In FNAF 4, you'll be on the left side of the bedroom. You can look out the door into the left hallway to find a small light illuminating the area. Running back, you can then close the door on any nightmare animatronic until they're gone. In Sister Location, you'll find yourself right in front of Balore's gallery, where any 2 random animatronic will be up on her stage. You can also find the shock panel that you have to use to shock the Funtime animatronics back to their stage before they walk off into your office. It's also important to note that only 2 animatronics per game can appear, meaning a total of 10 animatronics will be active per night. These animatronics will also be completely different, making one night completely different from another. But instead of explaining how a night would work, why don't I just show you? With this first example, it's all about showing you how an animatronic will progress into your office. In FNAF 1, look left and right to find animatronics. In FNAF 2, wear the mask on Withered Freddy, who will be keeping an eye out throughout this example. In FNAF 3, none other than Springtrap will be walking towards you, so play the Balloon Boy's voice line to get rid of him.
Hello?
In FNAF 4, look outside the door. If an animatronic is there, quickly close the door until you have heard that they left. In Sister Location, only shock an animatronic when they are right in front of you. Remember, balance all these games while checking back into your main office to make sure no one slipped through. So make sure to check each hallway as well. It's also worth mentioning that you have to go through the games one at a time, so you can't just skip from FNAF 1 to FNAF 4. If an animatronic is inside of your office, keep an eye on them to monitor how close they are, as resetting the game will only work when they're right in front of you. Once they are close enough, quickly flip the switch. With another example showing the faster pace of this game, in FNAF 3 make sure to watch out for the events where you'll find Springtrap getting closer and closer, so press the button playing Balloon Boy's voice. In your office, a few animatronics have slipped by with Nightmare Fredbear right in front of you. As always, press the lever to send him back. The more time you spend in the games, the higher chance an animatronic will have to get closer and closer to being right in front of you. One last time, send Toy Bonnie back where you're able to clear all the animatronics in your office, where you then have to prepare for another wave. When looking at a scenario where you simply mess up, if you don't pull the lever when an animatronic is right in front of you, the game will take longer to reset, allowing an animatronic to get near you and to jump scare you. Now taking a look at the first animatronic with a unique mechanic, Foxy. Right away I knew Foxy had to be a special animatronic and not just one that appeared somewhere in your office normally. So what better way to include him than with Foxy's code that is already included in Help Wanted's hub. Here there are a few stages with Foxy. In the first stage, of course, there is nothing. However, the next stage you'll notice that a Foxy will begin to pop their head out of the curtain, meaning Foxy's already in your office will not leave until you reset them back. In the third stage, Foxy's entire body will now be peering out of the curtains and is one step closer to jump scaring you. In the fourth stage, Foxy will now completely be out of his cove and will be more of a threat than ever. In the last stage, a Foxy will be right in front of you, where of course you need to reset them back into their game, but if you don't, you'll meet the end of your night. Now with all the different Balloon Boys, each Balloon Boy from their different games will actually have their own unique mechanic that of course line up with how they worked in their designated games, just slightly adjusted to fit with my concept if needed, so honestly including Balloon Boy here was pretty easy. With OG FNAF 2 Balloon Boy, of course you will stop the lights on both your hallways from working. Balloon Boy can't be sent back to their game and you forcefully have to wait until they leave after some period of time. JJ from FNAF 2 can also appear. Here she will disable the breaker system, meaning if an animatronic is in front of you, With the Nightmare Balloon Boy from FNAF 4, here he will sit on your desk after leaving his game and he will disable the ability to wear the Foxy mask, which is what even brings you to the FNAF games. Now with Phantom Balloon Boy, and something that will actually apply to all Phantoms, once a Phantom is in front of you, you will forcefully be jump scared and you won't be able to send them back to their game. This would disrupt any gameplay, so if you're in a FNAF game, this jump scare will kick you out and will bring you back to your main office. Now with the puppets, their mechanics will revolve around plushies. When a puppet enters your office, she will begin to walk towards you, and simply turning the lever will not work to send them back to their game. Now I just want to say I do think these plushies are important as they show up a lot of times in the modern FNAF game, so of course they play a pretty big role here, as I'll explain later as well. So you'll notice a plushie on your desk that correlates with the puppet in front of you. So take this plushie and travel to the game where that puppet came from. Here you'll find a new button on screen allowing you to place the puppet onto that game. Looking back into the office, the puppet will now be gone and will no longer be a threat. Looking at another example, here you have Nightmarian creepily walking towards you. Same deal as last time, find the plushie somewhere on your desk, travel to the game the puppet came from, and place the plushie somewhere in that game. Do this as fast as you can before the puppet reaches you to jump scare you. Of course, this can't be Help Wanted without Glitch Trap. Now I won't say who Glitch Trap is here, but there are definitely hints and it's not as obvious as it seems. Like with the base Help Wanted game, Glitch Trap will appear towards the beginning of your gameplay and will gradually get closer and closer to you. But here I also wanted to include him in the games themselves, as there are rare chances that you'll find Glitch Trap in your office replacing an animatronic.
Is it really you? You're supposed to be dead.
I wanted to make it clear that something is here and that something is essentially always watching you.
Say hi to Gabriel for me, will you?
I also like the idea of Hand Unit dismissing Glitch Trap with a few voice lines.
Welcome back. Great to see you again. Congrats on, quote-unquote, surviving another night, as we like to say. You know, it's crazy what stories people were able to come up with about Freddy's. Like walking animatronics or rogue endos. Perfectly fictitious stories for this game. So we hope you're enjoying it. But we did want to warn you about a certain glitch some of our other beta testers are reporting. You may have already seen a rabbit-like suit walking around or staring at you in one of the FNAF games. Don't worry, it's not a threat, and by no means can it actually hurt you. Just ignore it while we try to figure out a solution on our end. Again, under no circumstances should you get close to it, or even look at it. That said, good luck, and have fun!
He will specifically have a chance of appearing on night 2 behind the prize counter and will only randomly appear from here. On night 3, he'll be in the middle of your office.
What are you?
On night 4, he'll nearly be right in front of you and will be waving at you.
Have you really come back again?
Finally, on night 5, he will be right next to you, causing static on your screen, and will have 2 exclusive mechanics to night 5, making it the hardest one yet that I'll go over soon. Golden Freddy, arguably one of the coolest and most interesting parts of the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise, as he's one of my personal favorite animatronics. So when it came to Help Wanted, I was honestly surprised he wasn't there at all, and I mean like at all. I would have even been happy with him in a corner for a second or something like that. So with this Reimagined project, I knew I had to include Golden Freddy, and not just with some Easter egg or cameo. I wanted him to have a significant role that would impact the lore moving forward, so with that, remember this is just my interpretation. When loading into the office, there's a rare chance that you'll find a Golden Freddy plushie inside your office. Interesting, another plushie mechanic which may or may not have some lore importance. Here, this is a way to tell you that you now need to complete a set of steps to unlock a secret, so travel to the games to flash Golden Freddy with your flashlight before you get jump scared or before he disappears. Like I said earlier, night 5 will be the hardest, as Glitch will be adding 2 new mechanics to this night that you have to deal with alongside usual gameplay. In the office, with Glitch being on your side, he'll have the ability to teleport characters right into your office, essentially allowing them to skip the line and become a main threat. On top of this, you may have noticed a Glitch plushie near the prize counter. Now you'll be able to actually travel to the plushie and to the prize counter. With this mechanic, you'll notice that this mysterious endoskeleton arm is attempting to grab the plushie for some reason, so grab the plushie and place it on the opposite side before they grab it. If you fail to stop the endoskeleton from taking the plushie for themselves, this will happen. But if you're able to avoid the animatronics, keep an eye on Glitch teleporting animatronics and stopping the endo from reaching the plushie, you'll unlock the first ending where the night isn't over quite yet. Here your job is simple. You can now leave your office where you have to find the correct room to move on to the next game until you escape Glitch, so follow one simple rule: follow the tragedies.
You really thought it would be that easy, don't you remember? I always come back.
And then there was the bite of 87. Yeah. It's amazing that the human body can live without the frontal lobe, you know?
Doesn't it all feel so familiar? Where do you think you're going? You will never be able to stop us. This way.
Just kidding, video's not over yet, so please don't swipe off since we still have a lot to go over. So with this ending, it was of course inspired by the actual game where you have to complete a maze to reach the end where Glitch lures you into a room and where you're then stuffed inside of an animatronic. I kept everything the same except the way the maze worked. I instead wanted to focus on tragedies that were the key to move on to the next game. Tragedies that I believe play a big role in the modern timeline and the past agony and horror that is fueling it. So find Phone Guy being stuffed inside of the Freddy suit, the bite of 87, the spring lock incident, the bite of 83, and Michael being scooped. But now we can look at a secret path where you don't follow the rules. If you ignore the tragedies and instead look for the exits, you'll be rewarded with a secret ending. So in FNAF 1, go straight to the exit instead of left to where Phone Guy was stuffed inside of the Freddy suit. Or in a game like FNAF 3, go right and then straight instead of the arcade area where you found Springtrap, where you'll then find an exit leading to FNAF 4.
This way.
So after this, the ending will play like normal, but you'll now find an employee's door to your right, allowing you to escape. For the final ending, you unlock it by collecting all 16 tapes just like in the base game. You can find them randomly in different games or in your main office. So collect them before they disappear and you can listen to all the tapes in this room just like in Help Wanted. You can also keep track to how many tapes you've collected with the smaller monitor on your side in your office. After collecting them all, listen to the last one to unlock the final ending.
There is a way to kill it. It wants to escape. To escape through someone. Someone plugged into this game. That's you now. You have to let it begin the process of leaving through you. Then use the disconnect.
And now looking back to the other modes that I mentioned earlier, of course they're still missing from my concept. I had a few ideas on how to incorporate them, like them randomly showing up in the middle of a night as a sort of boss fight, where you would have to complete them in order to get back to your gameplay. But that just seemed like too much for one night, especially on night 5 for example, when you already have so much to deal with. So instead, they'll simply be extra game modes on your menu screen that will be known as overtime. Here you're working overtime completing different levels that are also based on fictitious events, like dealing with circus baby plushies in a dark room, or of course my favorite, maintenance mode. Here you of course have to repair certain animatronics and complete a certain set of tasks without getting jump scared. To fit it with my concept, it wouldn't just be with the FNAF 1 animatronics, but there would be 5 different levels for the 5 games. FNAF 1 would of course feature Freddy, FNAF 2 would feature Withered Foxy, FNAF 3 would feature Springtrap, FNAF 4 would feature the infamous Nightmare Chica, and Sister Location would feature none other than Circus Baby. After completing these levels, not only will you unlock collectibles, which we all love, but you also unlock skins and extra modes for animatronics, which I'll go over soon when I cover Custom Night. There wouldn't be hard versions for the other modes, but there will definitely be for the maintenance levels that I'm calling Tragedy Mode. Of course this builds off the ending, where the twist is you have to fix the animatronic featured in that tragedy. For example, like in FNAF 1, you have to repair Phone Guy stuffed inside of Freddy by taking objects out and replacing parts of the animatronic. In a game like FNAF 4, you'd have to repair Freddy right after the bite of 83, resetting the suit so it's back to suit mode and cranking back the spring locks. Or in FNAF Sister Location, where you have to try to attempt to fix a certain purple guy who has some animatronic parts stuck inside of him. Now this next part isn't necessarily another mode, but I like the idea of having hoaxes included in my game. If Fazbear is really trying to say that what happened in the story was fake, why not include actual hoaxes from the FNAF franchise that most of us probably remember? In FNAF 1 we could have Sparky, which I know is technically made canon with Secret of the Mimic, but still it could be a fun addition and a great callback to those early hoaxes. With FNAF 2, we could see the Purple Guy animatronic, which is honestly one of my favorites, and Toy Golden Freddy, as they would simply just replace an animatronic that can spawn. In FNAF 3, we would see Fred Chat, where with all the teasers we thought that this originally was going to be Golden Freddy. In FNAF 4, we could have a different model of Fredbear inspired by the mini-games where the Bite of 83 took place, as I personally believe those designs aren't really canon, so in a sense they could be seen as a hoax. In Sister Location, I thought it would be really fun if we saw someone like Golden Funtime Freddy, since Golden Freddy is notably missing from that game. But of course there has to be minigames that could possibly set up future entries and give us an insight to the lore and story. I've always liked the idea of minigames randomly being able to occur in between nights. This just makes them feel rare and in a sense more enjoyable when it finally happens. So here are 2 examples of how I would do minigames for Help Wanted.
Hen, it's me. After all this time, it's finally ours. Those wasted breaths were for nothing, but it should pay off. Any news on Edwin's whereabouts? Good. It better stay that way. Remember, this stays between us. Once I figure this out, this will be our future. See you tomorrow. Take the mask. Don't be scared. It will all be over soon. Free me, Vanessa.
But now let's finally look at Custom Night. Here with the basics, you would be allowed to disable any FNAF game from a night. You can remove specific animatronics if you don't want someone like Balloon Boy or the puppet to show up. And of course you can turn up the difficulty of every FNAF game. On top of this, I would also add skins that would change the appearance of every animatronic available, like a black light skin mode inspired by a cut level from the actual game, giving every single animatronic this really cool neon design. Or you could have something like the Unwithereds, where every animatronic who has withering would now be fixed, including the nightmares. There are just endless possible ways on how you could customize this game, which is why I won't go too deep into this final section. So, with that said, this is Five Nights at Freddy's Help Wanted Reimagined. Now with this game concept, there are a few things missing, like the Dreadbird DLC. Now this was simply because, in my opinion, this deserves its own dedicated video and game concept. There is just so much lore and story that I think could basically act as a standalone game in a way, centered around Fall Fest. So I didn't just want to squeeze it in with this video and rushing something that I think could be pretty unique. So that will be my next game concept that will be pretty different from the base DLC. If I ever get to Security Breach, I would do the same for Ruin, giving this DLC its own video. Princess Quest is missing since the mobile port of Help Wanted did include this minigame. There are teasers and a setup to Princess Quest, but ultimately I think it makes more sense that the story begins with Security Breach and is exclusive to just those arcade machines. But if you made it to the very end of this video, first of all, thank you so much, and second of all, there is a secret ending or video to this game concept that I want you to find. Throughout this video, there were a set of codes that flash on the screen briefly. Putting these codes together in a certain order will bring you to this hidden video. So here's the first part to that puzzle. But with all that said, thank you all so much for watching. I had so much fun making this video and I hope I can make more in the future. So what do you guys think? How would you make Help Wanted into a classic FNAF game? Please consider hitting that like and subscribe button, and thank you all so much for an amazing year. Cue the credits.
This place again. Father, is that you?
Five Nights at Freddy's Secret of the Mimic is the latest installment to the franchise, and it's already being regarded as a fan favorite FNAF game for many. It's already acted as one of the lore heaviest games in the franchise that has helped many theorists, including myself, to solve mysteries in parts of the timeline. But what if Secret of the Mimic was completely different? What if it included office gameplay and mechanics from the earliest FNAF games? What if Secret of the Mimic was a classic FNAF game? Well, join me today as I cover a fully animated game concept of what a point-and-click version of this game would look like that I'm calling FNAF FNAF Secret of the Mimic Reimagined. But for a quick disclaimer, by no means am I saying that this is what Secret of the Mimic should have been or that Steelworks Studios should have done this instead. I absolutely love Secret of the Mimic and actually every game that has come from the Steelworks era of the franchise. This is just a different take on this game using the past FNAF games as inspiration. So what makes a quote-unquote classic FNAF game? Well, I think it's actually a few things that have all been incorporated with this game concept. Number one, it should include a point-and-click style of gameplay that we saw with the first 7 games. Typically it's in an office with hallways or vents surrounding the room. Number two, it should include a cam-like system that shows us the route of animatronics or threats to help us survive. And number 3, like the name suggests, there should be at least 5 different nights of the player fighting off animatronics, with each one getting progressively harder and a chance of there being bonus nights. And finally, number 4, there's usually lore and a story, where luckily here we already have a lot of lore from the actual game to go off of. So combining all of this with Secret of the Mimic, we get this final product. Now the game starts with a Help Wanted newspaper like any classic FNAF game, but because Arnold is already an employee of Fazbear's Entertainment, I instead thought it would be cool if this opening showcased a weekly company newsletter from Fazbear. There could even be other references to lore like a mandatory Springlock safety meeting taking place on Wednesday, or another small column for Help Wanted with the Fall Fest crew leaving this Friday. On the center column, we learn that a technician's help is needed to retrieve an endoskeleton from a contractor who's gone quiet and is keeping Fazbear-owned tech from them. So travel to Murray's Costume Manor and retrieve this endoskeleton in 5 days or less to receive full pay. Loading in, the main gameplay takes place in a mix of the manager's office and the security office. We see the desk and mailbot from the manager's office, but the monitors and computer from the security office. It's not something we'll use here, but don't worry, things like moon.exe, hidden secrets, and text logs are something that will still be in this game, just used slightly different with this monitor. There's the Spring Bonnie bobblehead from Arnold's van, David's white tiger plushie which will be important later, and a Cleanovac to the side of the desk. The office is accompanied by 2 hallways and 2 doors that can be closed using the data drivers. But of course, pulling up the monitors, you'll find the cameras covering 12 different parts of Murray's Costume Manor. Most cameras feature 3 mascot animatronics that the Mimic can switch from, but some only have 1 animatronic that come with their own unique mechanic, like Jackie or Big Top that I'll go over soon. Cam 12 covers Admin Wing and features the Foam Puppy, the Jester, and Elephant mascot suits. Cam 11 covers Dolly's Workshop, and here she's the only animatronic present that the Mimic can use. Cam 10 covers the Theater and features the Foam Elephant and Puppy mascots alongside the Foxy Crew puppets. Cam 9 covers the Welcome Show and features the Penguin, Lion, and Foam Lion mascots. Cam 8 covers the Loading Bay, and this cam only features the Chica mascot who has a mechanic that connects to her music. Cam 7 covers the Welcome Lobby and features the Hedgehog, Foam Hedgehog, and Penguin mascot suits. Cam 6 covers the Storytime Nightlight Showroom and features the Lemur and Foam Poodle mascots. Cam 5 covers the Showroom Rooftop or Big Top Staircase, where he'll be the only animatronic that can appear. Cam 4 covers the Showroom Lobby and features the Jester, Poodle, and Mycelium Men mascots. Cam 3 covers Jackie's Showroom, where she is the only animatronic present as she can randomly pop out of her music box. Cam 1 and Cam 2 cover the left and right hallway surrounding the office. Watch these cameras to see if a mascot is close, and if so, use the data drivers to close the door when needed. When looking at the mascots, like the actual game, the Mimic will be the only main threat to the player who switches from mascot to mascot. He can be in any mascot or animatronic, so it's up to you to find out which one he's in and to keep track of him as he moves around Murray's Costume Manor. Here he starts out in the Mushroom mascot suit on Cam 4 and begins to move, and to signal you that the Mimic has moved locations, the feed will glitch out. The Mimic will then move to Camera 6 or the Nightlight Showroom before the feed glitches out once more. You then find him in Cam 1 and on the left hallway of the office. Animations of the mascots can occasionally play of them moving, so watch out. When a mascot is right in front of your office, turn the data driver to close the door and to listen to footsteps, meaning they have moved back, which should then allow you to open the door. But be mindful of your battery, as like in FNAF 1, closing and opening doors uses some electricity. Open the cams back up to find the Mimic and another mascot, where he is now inside of the Penguin mascot in Cam 9. Again, watch out for the camera feed glitch, meaning the mascot has moved, as he is now in Jackie's showroom before moving once more. If the mascot is at your door, close it and listen for the mascot's footsteps telling you that he's gone. But now we can start to look at the animatronics with unique mechanics. Now when looking at Jackie, the only way to know that the Mimic is now inside of this animatronic is by looking at Cam 3 and her showroom, where you'll find Jackie popping out of her music box accompanied by her voice lines. She can then move to your right hallway, where you'll now find the Mimic size replacing her own, as the camera feed glitches right when she starts moving. She'll appear right in front of your office, so be quick to close the door as fast as you can, since like the actual game, her main mechanic is that she's really fast and can go from cam to cam without even being noticed. she'll move between cams in just seconds, and before you know it, she'll be in the theater climbing across the room to reach you. Then you can find her in cam 4 next to these mascots staring at the camera, getting ready to move once again. She moves one last time to your left hallway where the camera catches her as she's moving to really show how fast she is. Moving on to Big Top, incorporating him into this style of gameplay was a bit difficult, so the only way he can appear is on cam 5 and through the showroom rooftop, where an animation will play showcasing Big Top entering Mary's costume manor and getting close to you. His hand will then come peering down into your office asking for a ticket. I of course drew inspiration from Rockstar Freddy's mechanic from Ultimate Custom Night, so look around different cams until you eventually find a blue ticket in the welcome lobby and head it back to Big Top where he'll take the ticket and will leave your office. With Dolly, her main mechanic is that she distorts the cameras for long periods of time using the shock pads on her hands. So opening up cam 11, you'll notice she's in a different position, meaning she is now the mimic. Once the distortion stops, you'll find her in cam 6 with her hand once more pointed towards the camera, before she distorts the feed, disabling the cameras for 5 seconds. This allows her to move around into your right hallway, where you'll find her right outside the door. Looking at Chica, I also wanted to give her a mechanic that separated her from the other mascots, as she does have a relatively large role in the game. So here, Chica's Party World music will randomly play loudly in different rooms with this soundbar icon indicating where it's coming from. There is a chance that Chica will actually be in the room where the music's coming from, or the room will be empty and the music is just to distract you. But you can actually find Chica on your left hallway, and if a mascot is already inside of your room and past your door, there's nothing you can do to get rid of them. Including Moon was also a bit difficult since it's theorized it's not even the mimic inside its costume, so instead I took inspiration from Freddy from FNAF 1. When you're low on power, you'll begin to hear Moon's lullaby in the background, and when you do run out of energy, the lights of the manor will turn completely off. So Moon will be on your left hallway and will be the only light source as he continues to sing his lullaby.
His babies we bet.
With secondary threats, here the Foxy Crew puppets would be missing from the stage where you start to hear the performance play. Different puppets can then show up in your office where you have to click on them in order to make them disappear, similar to Helpy from Ultimate Custom Night. Click on the Roxy and Foxy puppets as they move around your office, as this will force them to return to the main stage, where they will no longer be a threat. An important mechanic I've yet to mention is entering the spring lock suit that would act as the Freddy mask from FNAF 2. Whenever a mascot is inside of the office, you can enter the spring lock suit, which would force them to leave. But you can only be inside the suit for about 10 seconds before the spring locks would activate, crushing you, which would then end the night. Or if a mascot is still in your office, getting out will result in you getting jump scared. Night 5 would act as almost a boss fight with the Mimic Skeleton itself. Here, not only is the Mimic extremely fast, but like in the chase sequence with the base game, the Mimic will be able to break down your doors. Each time the Mimic appears in either hallway and you close the door on him, you'll hear a loud bang and the door's health will decrease by 1. The door can only handle 3 hits before it completely becomes disabled and will be unusable. So watch the Mimic move around the cameras and hope he doesn't reach your office. So if the Mimic appears on either hallway for a total of 3 times, your last option is to go inside of the springlock suit. The Mimic will stare at you while you're inside the suit, and all you can do is to wait for him to leave. After completing Night 5, you'll be met with the first ending, a termination slip from Fazbear's Entertainment. Because Arnold failed to retrieve the Mimic in 5 days or less, he's now being fired and sued for not following direct instructions. Of course, this is a nod to F10 and 4 giving false instructions to Arnold, and don't worry, we'll come back to her soon. For a bonus 6th night, Arnold will return to Mary's costume manor after being fired, where the Mimic will now be inside of the amalgamation of FNAF 1 parts from the parachute ending, or what's also known as M2 R&D. On the cams, and not only is he the most aggressive he's been yet, but like Chica, the Mimic will place the prototype springlock suits like Fredbear, Spring Bonnie, or Monty in different rooms accompanied by a shuffle noise to distract you. This will allow the Mimic to get closer and closer to your office, where the only way to get rid of him is by playing Edwin's voice lines in another room. This is of course inspiration from FNAF 3, like in that game, this will force the Mimic to move to that room. But there's a cooldown and limit which could also allow him to reach your office. So here the doors will be disabled from the last night, meaning nothing is stopping the Mimic from getting to you. So failing to keep the Mimic away from your office will result in you being jump scared. After completing Night 6, you'll be met with the second ending, a newspaper covering the fire that burned Murray's costume manor to the ground. Nothing is left behind or recovered, and it's being reported that a technician who was inside the building has gone missing. All assets from MCM are being given away to a secondary company, and this company is already planning to build a new franchise location over it. In order to unlock the third and final ending, like the base game, we're going to incorporate Moon.exe. But unlike that game, instead of having a New Game Plus mode, after beating Night 6 you'll unlock Custom Night mode. You can customize between the mascots and animatronics with unique mechanics, and with the secondary threats like the puppets or Moon. Complete all of the modes like Tiger Rock or Mimic Frenzy, as each time you complete a mode you'll unlock a collectible like the Fall Fest Globe. These collectibles will of course be used in Moon.exe, so most importantly collect Arnold's data driver. Back in the office, the data driver will now be inserted in the monitor, so use it to turn on the monitor and to access Moon.exe. Nothing with this minigame actually needs to change. It still works perfectly in this style of gameplay, and it would work just like any other minigame with lore we've gotten before. And the collectibles would work the exact same way. Different collectibles unlock different paths. The lore would also stay exactly the same. I think it tells us what we need to know while also leaving speculation up to the community. At the very end, collect the glitch permissions from Sun, and this is where I would simply add an additional step, since taking the permissions to Edwin's house and then to David's room to reset the mimic wouldn't really work here. So after collecting the glitch permissions, you're then going to use it right away. There will be a last option to insert the data driver into an endoskeleton, which will cause the monitor to shut off and for you to unlock a new camera. Pulling off the monitor, you'll unlock the third and final ending. The mimic, who has now been reset into the state of mimicking David. The mimic is outside and playing on David's playground.
Why won't you play with me? Why won't you play with me?
Now when looking at the lore, like I mentioned earlier, I don't want to or need to change anything. My goal here is to just translate the free roam style of gameplay to this office gameplay. So I think the best way to execute this are through Easter eggs and through the cameras. After Night 6, not only do you unlock Custom Night, but you also unlock the ability to input codes into your monitor displaying hidden rooms. I took inspiration from Ruin, where we can find hidden camera stations that unlock the scooping room. But here, numbers would be scattered around MCM that can be put together just like they are in the base game. You can occasionally find 4 numbers scattered around different cameras, so input them in the numerical order of cams they were found in to unlock a new room. This would allow us to learn about Edwin's room and David's bedroom, or about the research and development area including the prototype FNAF 1 Pizzeria and Animatronics. We could find the dead technicians scattered around MCM from the past teams that were also sent to retrieve the mimic. We could even find F10 and 4 in our office accompanied by some voice lines.
If you do not, M2 will never stop pursuing you. Tell Edwin, I still love him.
With the other lore like the text logs, they would be unlocked at the same time you unlock a collectible. A new collectible also unlocks a new text log. They could be read in the monitor in the office since this also doesn't need to be changed. But with something like the voice logs, I think a good way to implement them here are through cutscene-like moments. Similar to the post-night cutscenes from FNAF 2, these would randomly play after nights and it would feature voice lines from Edwin or Fiona.
What the hell was that? They treat me like some contractor to crack a whip at. Oh, Fiona was right. They don't think of me as a friend anymore. This is the last project I ever do for them.
I already covered 3 endings that replace the endings from the base game. The first ending is in place of the bad ending where Arnold gets fired and stuffed into a suit by the mimic. The second ending is in place for the parachute ending where Arnold escapes but is captured and Mary's costume manor burns to the ground. And with the third ending, it's of course in place for the Moon.exe ending. But I still want to include part of the first ending where Arnold is stuffed inside of a suit, since I wasn't able to fit it with the termination slip. So instead, to replace this, there would be rare game over screens, where you're stuffed inside of a suit and the mimic watches you from a distance, similar to the game over screen from past games. But in terms of something missing or something that I just found hard to find a place for are the tapes that tell us about Edwin Murray and his family. The best way I could think of to include them are through cutscene-like moments as well, but I guess it would just feel a bit random since in the actual game they had a sort of mechanic to them. So how would you guys add the tapes? But with all that said, I hope you guys enjoyed my take on FNAF Secret of the Mimic as a classic FNAF game that I call FNAF Reimagined. With a project like this, it could honestly go either way. Characters could have different mechanics, and even the office could look completely different depending on how each person would do it. This is just my take on it, so what do you guys think? I also again want to make it clear that by no means am I saying that this is what Studio Studio should have done. These new FNAF games have introduced or reintroduced this franchise to so many fans, and without these games, the franchise, story, and timeline wouldn't be what it is today. So with all that said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and thank you so much for watching. Make sure to comment down below any thoughts or if I should continue this Reimagined series, since I actually think all Studio FNAF games could work as a classic game. So please consider hitting that like and subscribe button, and I really do appreciate all the support on the channel.